Celebrating their first anniversary, a young couple entered the Vermont mountains for a camping trip. 3 days later, only one would make it back alive, setting off a desperate search for a missing person and the discovery of something so shocking it seems nearly unexplainable. Join us as we look into the horrific story of Emily and Joseph Ferlazzo. Before we begin, we would like to extend our deepest sympathies to the family and friends of Emily Ferlazzo, a young woman and nurse lost far too soon. It was Friday, October the 15th, when 43-year-old Joseph Ferlazzo and his 22-year-old wife Emily and their family dog Remington piled into their converted camper and headed out for an anniversary getaway. The pandemic was starting to fade, and the couple had spent most of the prior year living in the camper on her mother's property in Northfield, New Hampshire. It seemed like a good time to get out and enjoy themselves, and they'd be meeting up with Joseph's sister and boyfriend the next day. It was also a chance for them to get back to Vermont, the state they had left the previous year after the pandemic had made living together tough for the two. Joseph had been a licensed tattoo artist and body piercer, one of the many career choices that was hit hard by the changes brought about by the quarantine. Emily worked as a nurse, and while her husband's work faded away, hers had become one of the most vital frontline jobs, but one that carried some of the highest risks and burnout rates in the country. The two eventually left Vermont for an inexpensive place to stay and to ride out the storm until better days came back. The trip from Northfield, New Hampshire to Bolton, Vermont takes about 2.5 hours, winding through some breathtaking scenery. The leaf-looking season for Vermont is in the middle of October, drawing visitors from all over the lake region and the country to take a look at the beautiful splashes of color. The couple would be staying at a campsite just off of Vermont Route number 2 and the Bolton Valley Access Road. Nearby, there would be the Bolton Potholes, an area known for gorgeous cascades, waterfalls, and swimming holes. It was truly an autumn paradise, with temperatures comfortable in the 70s and clear skies. And then, the next morning, Joseph walked into Maxie's restaurant in nearby Waterbury Village to have breakfast with his sister and her boyfriend. Emily was not with him. An excuse must have been made for her absence. The trio had their meals and then parted ways. What probably just dawned on you didn't register with the people Joseph was dining with. Emily was not there. Whatever the excuse he gave was, it could not have been true. She couldn't have stayed back at the hotel because they weren't staying at one. Instead, they were staying in their camper. She couldn't have gone out for a drive on her own because Joseph had their only vehicle. Emily just was not there. On Monday, October the 18th, Joseph would call Emily's parents and let them know that he and she had had an argument. Just outside of Bolton, he said, the two had argued. He stopped the camper and she had gotten out and walked away down Vermont Route number 2, saying that she would call for an Uber to take her back to New Hampshire. Joseph said that he then drove back down the road to a convenience store, stopped there for a while. Then he drove back hoping to pick her up. She was nowhere to be found, and he assumed that she had been able to get a ride. She was last seen, according to Joseph, wearing a black long-sleeved shirt, ripped jeans, and white sneakers. Emily's parents told him that she had never arrived. The family immediately called the police and reported her as missing. They knew the couple had a rocky relationship and that there had been some incidences where they saw bruises and scratches on their daughter. They had suspected there had been at least a few cases of domestic violence between the two of them. Perhaps the two were just incompatible. Perhaps it was the stress of the times with little income, or maybe even the cramped quarters of the two of them living in a tiny converted camper. The police had never gotten involved before, but now those incidents made the parents very suspicious of Joseph's story. The police would agree, and they needed to talk to Joseph. They couldn't reach him, though, as he never brought the camper back home to her parents' property. Joseph didn't come home. Instead, he headed down to the town of St. Albans, Vermont, about 60 miles away from their campsite in Bolton. He headed to a friend's home and stopped for a visit. That friend let him park the camper outside of his house on Meadowbrook Lane, not having any idea that Joseph was apparently keeping a horrible secret. That night, Joseph would stay in the camper. He wasn't sleeping, though. What he was actually doing was a gruesome end to his marriage with Emily. The next morning, Joseph would head to a nearby Maple Fields convenience store as if nothing had happened at all. Throughout the night, police both in New Hampshire and Vermont had been on the lookout for young, blonde-haired Emily, but to no avail. Joseph, with dark curly hair, numerous tattoos, and a nose piercing, had been spotted several times here and there. In particular, after seeing the missing persons report on the television news, one of the servers at Maxie's restaurant called in to say that he had eaten there on Saturday morning, but that Emily was not with him.
Vermont State Police are looking for a New Hampshire woman who disappeared from the town of Bolton. Officials say 22-year-old Emily Ferlazzo from Northfield was last seen Saturday afternoon. They say she and her husband were staying in an Airbnb. They say the couple had an argument and Ferlazzo went for a walk. Her husband says he went to the store and when he came back, he couldn't find her. Ferlazzo was last seen wearing a long-sleeved black shirt, ripped jeans, and white sneakers. She also has a sleeve tattoo on her left arm and a snake tattoo from her chest to her torso. If you have any information, you're asked to call Vermont State Police.
A friend of Joseph's in St. Albans had also called to say that he had run into the man on Monday evening, but that he did not know where Joseph had gone afterwards. The next morning, Vermont State Police Detective Sergeant Amy Nolan happened to walk into the same Maple Fields convenience store that Joseph had. It took a moment for her to make sure that he was the man they were looking for, and then she approached him. The situation certainly could have gone badly, but Sergeant Nolan calmly let Joseph know that he was wanted for questioning in the disappearance of Emily Ferlazzo. Joseph, knowing what had actually happened and perhaps resigned to whatever fate would bring next, surrendered to Sergeant Nolan and was taken back to the State Patrol barracks in St. Albans. Once in custody, Joseph began telling everything.
We start with breaking news tonight. A woman reported missing has been found dead, and her husband tells state police that he did it.
NBC5's Carolyn Sistran joins us live from the St. Albans police barracks. Carolyn, what are police saying?
Well, Brian, Alice, Joseph Ferlazzo was recognized at a Maple Fields convenience store earlier today by a state police detective, and that detective bringing him here to the St. Albans barracks just minutes away from that store, where he eventually confessed to killing his 22-year-old wife.
The information he provided was that he had killed his wife, Emily. He said that he had done so in the town of Bolton in the early Saturday morning hours.
Well, her body will be brought to the chief medical examiner's office in Burlington for an autopsy tomorrow to determine the cause and manner of death and to confirm her identity. And Joseph Ferlazzo is still here in St. Albans, and police say that he is expected to be charged with first-degree murder by the end of the night, and his arraignment will be tomorrow in Burlington. We're live in St. Albans tonight. Carolyn Sistran, NBC5 News.
The camper van would turn out to be the grisly scene of a murder and a frantic attempt to dispose of her body. There were still many questions to be asked, but there was no doubt as to what had happened. Now it would just be a matter of untangling the evidence in light of what Joseph had said and would admit to. Forensic teams would work around the clock, piecing together not just how the murder had happened in the camper van, but the lives of the couple who had been living within it. Meanwhile, Joseph would lay out his version of what had happened. In his story, Joseph would tell police investigators that he and Emily had gotten into a heated argument on the way to Bolton. Pulling over, the argument became a fight, and it came to blows, with her kicking him in the groin. The pair calmed down and got back into the camper and continued on their journey. That evening, according to the account Joseph gave to the police, Emily went to lay down and was asleep in just a matter of minutes. Joseph then said that he took a pistol and shot her twice in the back of the head while she was sleeping, killing her almost instantly. The Vermont State Medical Examiner's autopsy would confirm that portion of his story, that a nearly point-blank gunshot had been the cause of Emily's death. Joseph then told investigators that he had put a black plastic trash bag over Emily's head and dragged her body from the bed and stuffed her into the cramped bathroom of the camper. There she would remain while he had breakfast with his sister, and there she would continue to remain the next day and the following day too as he drove to St. Albans. After he secured permission to stay in the camper at his friend's place in St. Albans, Joseph had spent the night dismembering Emily's body. Using a handsaw, Joseph removed her hands, feet, arms, and legs, putting each of the parts in separate trash bags. When the camper was brought to the St. Albans Police Barracks lot, forensic teams entered the vehicle. All of the parts of Emily's body were found within the camper, along with the alleged weapon, a Glock 19 semi-automatic pistol. Other weapons, ammunition, and a sizable amount of cash were also found. There was no sign of Remington the dog. Whether he told the police what his plans were for Emily's body after that point has not been released to the public at the time of this video. Joseph, in a protective mask and face shield, would appear on closed-circuit television the next day for his arraignment in court. After charges and preliminary information were offered, it was ordered that Joseph be held without bond until the time of his trial. At the arraignment, even though he had confessed to the killing and provided details of what had happened to the officers the previous day, Joseph would enter a plea of not guilty. Over the next year and beyond, Joseph would remain in jail awaiting trial. During this time, he applied for a court-appointed attorney. Filings showed that in the previous year to the incident, he and Emily had only made about $4,000 in verifiable income. He also stated on the form that beyond about $3,500 in the couple's bank account, he had on hand about $10,000 in cash. Forensic personnel in searching the camper van, however, reported they found some $20,000 in cash in the vehicle. In addition, Joseph listed the camper van, a 2016 Jeep, and a 2021 Ducati motorcycle in his possession, along with another unspecified motorcycle. Investigators would find that he had given both motorcycles to friends earlier to either hold on to or keep prior to the incident. Records would also show that he still roughly owed about $6,000 on the Ducati motorcycle. The camper and the cash on hand, being a big part of the evidence in the trial, left him with an inability to pay the full amount that would be considered normal for a trial of this magnitude. He would be allowed to use a public defender, funded at least in part with his own limited resources. Emily's family and friends were left to cope with the loss as best they could. The Ferlazzo's dog, Remington, had been found apparently, and then dropped off at one of Joseph's friends' houses before the incident occurred. The dog now lives with Emily's mother and stepfather, Adrian and David Bass. The Bass family, devastated by the loss of their daughter, were able to receive some counseling from a special social work group that operates as part of the Vermont State Police Major Crimes Unit. They thanked the group, but said that the loss might never be something they could get over. In December of 2022, Adrian and David would win a civil case against Joseph Ferlazzo for the death of Emily. The family would be awarded a judgment of $1.5 million. While there was no way that Joseph would be able to pay that amount of money, the Basses would say the case and the judgment were done to make sure that in no way Joseph would ever be able to profit off the death of their daughter. Should he sell his story, any proceeds would go to her family rather than him. In August of 2023, Joseph's attorney would request additional forensic testing on the firearm allegedly used in the murder as part of his defense. It can be assumed that after the reporting of those results, Joseph's murder trial should follow along not too long after. Until then, his plea of not guilty will have to stand until the evidence and his own confession can be brought before a judge and jury. On a side note, this is not the first time the Ferlazzo family has encountered murder. In October of 2009, Joseph's stepmother, Young-hee Lynn Ferlazzo, was found stabbed to death in her apartment. Joseph Ferlazzo Sr. had come home after a late-night grocery shopping trip and found her dead on the floor in their home in Upper Gwinnett Township in Pennsylvania. The father was questioned in the stabbing but was not considered a suspect. It is now considered a cold case by local police. Lynn Ferlazzo had been the manager of a massage parlor owned by her husband. The massage parlor had been raided sometime before, and a number of workers had been charged with prostitution, including the woman's niece. In the case of the younger Ferlazzo, we will have to wait to see if justice will be served in the death of Emily. If anything can be taken from this case, it is that domestic arguments and violence are serious issues. If you or someone you know is the victim of domestic violence, please seek help and do not allow yourself to become a victim of continued abuse or even worse. Check your local area for domestic violence survivor resources or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Or you can simply text the word START to 88788. There are people who care and they will help you.
Simonette had it all figured out. She had her dream job, she was doing what she loved, and she volunteered at the local church among taking part in other activities that were aimed towards helping people. A school teacher with a constant smile on her face and a loving husband. Apparently, she had a dream life, but a mixture of escorts, money, and lies made her apparently perfect life crumble to pieces. Albuquerque, New Mexico, the city blessed with perfect weather, having a combination of blue skies and sunshine for at least 310 days out of the year. But there was another blessing that came for the Mapes family on September 25, 1982. Their daughter, Simonette, was born, and since her early years of life, she sported a bright smile on her face. Even though she was born there, by 1990 she had lived in many cities around the United States due to her father's job with the United States Air Force. The family would move every time the head of the family would receive a new assignment in a different city. The Mapes clan finally settled in New York. It was a pretty drastic change because they had just come from sunny Florida. Simonette had a normal childhood. She split her time between playing and studying, and even from an early age it was obvious that she was academically inclined. After graduating from Fort Hamilton High School, she decided to attend the College of Staten Island. Because she majored in education and completed her bachelor's degree, the next obvious step was to apply to be a part of the educational system. Thus, Simonette began teaching social studies in 2006. Some of the schools where she practiced her profession were in somewhat bad parts of Brooklyn, but she didn't mind. Furthermore, instead of being intimidated by the lifestyle and choices of some of her students, she decided to become more involved and help them. Simonette was the head of the Girls Leadership Club, teaching young women how to stand up for themselves and how to adopt a better attitude for the well-being of their own future. She also founded the Fairy Godmother Project, which provided prom dresses for students who were underprivileged. Aside from finding purpose by helping her students in any way she could, Mapes stumbled on something else, more specifically, love. She met a man at one of the schools where she taught. He was an English teacher. Simonette fell in love with Jonathan Crupi, and before they knew it, the two realized they were kindred spirits. In 2007, the two got married, vowing to love each other for the rest of their lives. The newlyweds found a condo on Forest Hill Road in New Springfield, Staten Island. They made it their love nest. After settling into their new home, she took a job teaching high school students at the School of Classics, an academy of thinkers, writers, and performers. She started her new job in 2009, and Jonathan also taught at the same school. Throughout the first years of their marriage, Mr. and Mrs. Crupi had an amazing time. She was a big fan of Disney, so they would go on vacation to Disney World in Orlando, Florida every year. The two would take thousands of pictures, and the smile she had on all of them said that she was having the time of her life. During the rest of the year, she taught and volunteered with the ASPCA and also had become a member of the Leukemia Foundation. The two also adopted a pair of dogs that she would frequently take on walks through the neighborhood. Life went on without any problems. It all seemed perfect. From the outside looking in, at least. But in the summer of 2012, the couple hit a few speed bumps. Jonathan Crupi had been living a dual life. Both of them were supposed to graduate with their master's degrees at the same time. She received a list from the college with the names of the students who were about to receive their diplomas, but her husband's name was missing. She knew that something was going on, and she confronted him, wanting to know what was up. While looking in her eyes, Crupi said the strangest thing. He told Simonette that the school had difficulty spelling his name, and that was the reason that he wasn't on the list. She didn't quite believe him, but in her mind, Jonathan was innocent until proven guilty. But the doubts didn't stop there. One evening, Simonette looked through his phone's call log. She sensed that something else was going on. Upon scrolling through the list of numbers, she saw one that had been frequently called. She rang the number, and a woman named Miss Pumpkin answered. During their brief conversation, she wasn't able to find out anything, but she still had that sixth sense. She was convinced that her husband was unfaithful, even though she didn't have any concrete proof, at least not yet. Simonette later found out that Jonathan was diverting money from his account and directing it towards several escort services. This sparked an argument between the two. His diverting money that should have gone to pay for his master's degree was instead being spent on lust. July 5th, 2012 was a dark day. The breathless body of Simonette was found lying face down on the floor. The woman had 15 stab wounds in her back and neck. The murder weapon had perforated her lung, aorta, and jugular vein, but she did not die immediately, but rather she bled to death slowly. Apart from the fatal wounds, she had another on her ring finger, consistent with a defensive injury. She also had abrasions and bruises on her foot, arm, and shin, which were consistent with injuries one might sustain falling down a flight of stairs. This happened just 2 days shy of their 5th wedding anniversary. Jonathan was heartbroken. According to his statement, on that day he got up at 6:45 a.m., well before his wife. He let her sleep in a little bit more, and at 7:30 a.m. he touched her shoulder, waking her up. Jonathan said that he needed to run some errands and he'd also take the car for an inspection. Simonette asked her husband if he would stop by and pick up some books and social plans from the school. She needed them to organize her next teaching session. Then she went back to sleep. Jonathan said he spent most of his time in Brooklyn on that day. He went to a discount theater, being in the mood for a show. And what better show to watch than Wicked? It played at a theater on Atlantic Avenue. After the show, he went straight to the school. Once in the building, he went straight to her office and picked up what she had asked of him. It was around 10:06 when he left the grounds. The next thing he claimed was that he texted his wife. He wanted to let her know that he had grabbed the books and plans and that he was off to get the car inspected, but he said she never texted him back. Upon finishing the inspection, he still had some errands to run. Crupi went to 5 different shoe stores saying he was in need of a pair, but after looking around, he didn't find anything he liked, so he didn't buy anything. It was 11:50 a.m. Simonette still had not texted him back, so he sent her another message, letting her know that he was going to Home Depot to pick up some paint. She didn't respond. He said around 12:15 he called her, thinking that the ringtone might wake her up, but without any result. Simonette did not answer. Crupi never made it inside Home Depot. He said he drove into the parking lot and changed his mind about the paint and went home. Upon entering the condo, he immediately called 911. Simonette's body was just lying there, and it seemed to be the result of a robbery that had gone off the rails. The police quickly came, and that's when Jonathan told them that it may be gang-related, but they didn't make the connection between the sweet teacher and a street gang that would want revenge. But Crupi told them about an event that had happened a few weeks prior. The two had survived a shootout, and that incident made his wife go on Facebook and write a post about how kids and teens from Staten Island shouldn't go around acting like Brooklyn gangsters because they have an easier way of life and have no idea what real thugs went through. Clearly, everyone thought the death was a gang-related retaliation. The loss of Simonette devastated her parents, Teresa and John Mapes.
I wanted you to know how much I love you, and that I never stopped thinking of the day that you were born. It was so beautiful, and I was so happy. The day you were 3 years old, and you were so sick, we were afraid we were going to lose you. The first day of school, and how you cried to come home. The day you graduated high school with honors and on the dean's list. And of course, that's my Simonette. The day you turned sweet 16. So beautiful. The day you came home and told me, Mom, I got a tattoo, please don't be mad. The day you came home and told me, I'm running away, and we had to chase you all the way to Queens. The day you came home and told me, Mom, I'm going to college to become a teacher. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to teach these kids how to be better people. The day you came home and told me, I got my bachelor's, Mom. The day you came home and told me, Mom, I got a job with the New York City Department of Ed. The day you came home and told me, Mom, I got my master's, and I got it with honors. Well, that's the party we never got to have. Well, the day you told me when Dad was laying in bed, they thought that he had lung cancer. And you told me, Mom, don't worry, I will never leave you. And you're going to come live with me, Mom. Never got to see that day. Thank God in a way, because Dad's still here, but you're not. I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me. It's a pain I have to live with. But this video is for you, Simonette. I love you so much.
They received a platform to speak out from the media, and her father asked for help, saying they needed to catch the killer who was running around the streets, possibly looking for his next victim. The grieving father, with tears in his eyes, closed his statement by saying that the murderer will pay, and he will not rest until they are caught and sent behind bars. A few days passed, and the funeral arrived. On July 10, 2012, in Willowbrook, Simonette was laid to rest. It was a bleak affair, not only for her immediate family, but also her friends. They would refer to her as Sissy, a nickname only reserved for the people that knew her best. About 200 family members and friends attended the event. Among those friends, about a dozen leather-clad bikers, police officers in uniform, teachers and teens who may at one point have been her students, all gathered in a dignified tribute to Simonette Mapes Crupi, who was murdered at just 29 years old. The Mass took place at Our Lady of Pity Church, where Simonette would actually volunteer when she had free time. Everyone was sad, keeping their eyes to the ground, thinking about the wonderful memories they had in the company of their deceased teacher. But there was one person that was acting kind of differently in comparison to others. It is true, everyone grieves in their own way, but Jonathan Crupi was sobbing and shaking uncontrollably. He clutched the rosary in one hand and kissed 2 roses before placing them on the casket. This behavior seemed odd, not because he was visibly in a world of pain, but because right after her death, her parents asked who would have done such a terrible thing, and Crupi replied saying they just needed to get over the incident and move on. The doubts that his sentiments were honest grew as time went on. Crupi, immediately after his wife's body was placed in the ground, started dating another woman, and she looked strikingly like Simonette. He even started to cut off any ties he had with her family, forbidding Teresa, her mother, from coming to pick up her late daughter's belongings. The series of events was upsetting, but the family was confident that the case would be solved. Fortunately, Jonathan Crupi's facade was no match for the police. They calculated that Simonette had been killed between 2 a.m. and 7:30 a.m., way earlier than 2:20 p.m. when the husband called 911. Crupi made it look like a home invasion before driving around town to various spots to build an alibi. He didn't have the stub from the movie he had seen to prove that he had attended. The truth was that Jonathan spent the afternoon with his favorite sex worker, known as Miss Pumpkin, the woman that Simonette called after she looked through his phone. When he said that she asked him to pick up her books, well, that was a lie as well. Staff members at the school clearly stated that he didn't need to do that at all because Simonette had all the necessary materials already at her home. He just needed reasons to get out of the house for a longer period of time. The couple was going through a very rough time, mainly because of his lies. Lying about getting his master's degree and lying about the family finances really took a toll on Simonette. She found out that her husband had spent over $50,000 on escort services and had dropped out of the master's program. She was heartbroken. It was like the entire marriage was crumbling around her. These fines made the tensions unbearable. Simonette threatened him with divorce and was close to talking to a lawyer about separating from her husband. Before killing his wife in cold blood, he went on his laptop. Jonathan searched for methods of cleaning up a crime scene and ways to use Clorox to get rid of any DNA traces. His search history led the police to take action. In November of 2012, Crupi was finally arrested after enough evidence was found. He was charged with second-degree murder and criminal weapons possession. The family felt vindicated by the arrest. It was a "I knew it" moment. Although everything pointed against him, Jonathan maintained his innocence. He never admitted to his actions and blamed everything on the home invasion story he had used from the beginning. His trial took place in the summer of 2015, and even though the prosecution did not have a murder weapon or any witnesses, they still possessed a strong circumstantial case. It was centered around his Google searches and the money he had blown on porn and sex workers. During the trial, Miss Pumpkin was called to testify. She and Jonathan had been meeting up since 2009. He told her that his name was Mike when they first got together. Crupi was browsing on adult websites, as he would often do, and stumbled across her phone number. One simple call was all it took for him to be hooked. After that call, they met in the same bedroom that he shared with his now deceased wife. During the course of 3 years, Crupi and the sex worker met up every 6 to 8 weeks. He would arrange different rooms at 3 motels he was very familiar with. The lawyer continued his questioning. He asked Miss Pumpkin if Simonette ever called her. The woman denied the allegation, even though it was true. She admitted that she was often called by angry wives who would find her number in their husbands' phones, but never by Simonette. Apparently, Jonathan had instructed her to lie. She did receive a call from him on the day he murdered his wife, around 11 a.m. for a quick session. They met at the Comfort Inn at 12:40 p.m. When he got undressed, she noted that she didn't see any bruises or marks on his body, nothing that would indicate an altercation or fight between him and his wife ever taking place. His lust didn't stop after he took Simonette's life. A month after she was murdered, he started calling on her again. They started having weekly 90-minute sessions in his parents' house, of course, without them knowing it. In one of the meetings, he asked her if she had heard about the murdered Brooklyn schoolteacher. When Miss Pumpkin said that she did, he admitted that the victim was his wife, and Jonathan got very emotional when speaking about his late spouse to the escort. He almost cried. The entire trial lasted about 5 weeks, and on July 20th, 2015, he was convicted of stabbing his wife to death. The jury reached their decision after just 2 hours.
Get to see him here. Guilty.
A long time. Took a long time, but we finally got it. We knew after 3 days, maybe before, But the first 3 days, it was shock to us. But after that, we knew. Just didn't understand why he made his family go through this, made everybody go through this. But he's a demon. He's a psychopath. You know, our lives are still going to be messed up. Always. It's a new normal. Something that we never forget. You know, we think about this all day, every day. We don't cry all day, but we cry every day. You know what I mean? So we're sad because, you know, this was one of our, he was like a son to us. He really was. It's something we never, ever seen or would even expect. And this psychopath did this. It's unconscionable. I just don't understand, but we're very, very happy. Very, very happy. Thank God for that jury. Thank you, Jesus.
This has been long awaited, 3 years, and he got what he deserved. I just hope the sentencing matches. Thank you. And my baby can rest in peace. Amen. Amen. Oh, yeah.
They were convinced that the reason he killed her was that she had confronted him about the escorts and throwing the family's budget at them. Jonathan was surprised when he heard his sentence. He didn't expect to receive 25 years to life. He addressed the family in court saying he apologized, but it was not clear what for, because right after that, Jonathan continued to say that he did not kill his wife and that he was innocent. Crupi's attorney filed an appeal in 2019 arguing that the search warrants to look through his electronics were illegal. Of course, he lost that appeal. His earliest release date remained 2037. Jonathan Crupi quickly acclimated to life in prison. After just a few months of being incarcerated, he posted an ad on a prison pen pal service. He was looking for a new lady. He was sick of being single and was trying to find his soulmate. Jonathan said he didn't care about the race, height, weight, or religious beliefs of the girl that would steal his heart. He just wanted someone that is fun, intelligent, and knows how to stimulate him. In that ad, he repeatedly stated that he did not commit murder and he was only an innocent man who fell victim to a corrupt system. Upon taking notice of the ad, Teresa Mapes called the Clinton Correctional Facility. Simonette's mother was outraged that they let him write those words and possibly fool another girl. The woman demanded that the ad be taken down, considering it a slap in the face towards her family and towards everyone that had supported them and Simonette. As she was explaining her motives for the call, Teresa warned the officer who she was speaking to that Jonathan was a dangerous man. He was mentally unstable, saying only a person with deep psychological problems could do what he did. The officer thought that was referring to the murder, but Teresa remembered something that had happened while Simonette was still alive. Crupi had the 2 dogs with his wife, but she was the only one who cared for them. He actually broke their backs not once, but 2 times because they were misbehaving. Jonathan is still in prison to this day, paying for the horrible deeds that he did. After her death, and as an homage to her one and only daughter, Teresa Mapes created a Facebook group called R.I.P. Simonette Sissy Mapes. There she frequently posts messages that keeps Simonette's memory alive, as well as saying how much she misses her and how her life is not complete without her daughter. The group has over 1,000 members, most of which having a close connection to their devoted teacher.
This is a truly mysterious and strange story about a man who allegedly murdered his wife in cold blood. But the narratives he told the police were truly out of this world. Then, he disappeared for a number of years without anyone knowing where he is. This story starts with a woman named Gwen who picked up her children at the bus stop on October 10, 2012. As she was driving back to her house, she spotted the Chadwick children waiting at the bus stop. It was pretty odd because their parents were never late picking them up. The 2 boys and Gwen's kids were in the same prep school in Ojai, California. Since she knew the family, she decided to stop and see what was going on. It was out of character for QC and Peter to forget to pick up their 2 children. The boys were 9 and 12 years old, and they had an older brother who was 15, but studied at another school. The boys' mom, Kui Chu, or QC as her friends called her, was a stay-at-home mom. She was very meticulous with their schedule. They were her entire focus, and their father Peter would usually pick them up at the bus stop every single day. So there was no reason as to why the boys would be there alone, waiting for the bus on their own. They all lived in a gated community that was part of a high-end neighborhood. Safety and security were a primary concern for the ones living in such a place. Gwen couldn't leave them there and decided to take them home by herself. One of the boys tried to call his parents but couldn't get an answer. Little did the little ones know that what happened in their house would lead to an international manhunt. After they arrived, the woman who drove them home walked up to the Chadwick house and rang the doorbell. To her surprise, no one answered. Neither of the kids had keys to their house because they were never confronted with such a situation. Seeing that the house was empty, Gwen takes the boys back to her house, fixing everyone dinner. After they ate, the mom decided to try and contact some mutual friends to get a hold of the Chadwicks, but she didn't have any luck finding out where they were. So, the next step was to call the Newport Police Department. She requested them to do a wellness check on the family. The police arrived at around 7 p.m. They didn't get a response from either of their phones. Peter's phone went to voicemail, and his wife's phone kept ringing. They also tried to contact local hospitals to see if they've maybe gone to the emergency room, but there was no sign of them. So, by 7:45 p.m., they decided to get into the home. After they opened the door, all the lights were off. The wife was always meticulous, keeping the place spotless. After they entered, the police saw that in the kitchen, it looked like lunch was about to be made, but something interrupted the process. There were 2 plates on the kitchen island, and they were just left there. They noticed that the garage door was also open. The police officers then entered the couple's bedroom. Everything looked normal. Then they went into the bathroom. The police saw that the rug was crumpled next to the bathtub, so they walked closer. They noticed that one of the flower vases that was on the edge of the bathtub was knocked over, and pieces of glass were shattered all over the place. After that, they looked inside the tub, and they noticed some brown-looking smudge and some brown drops. The smudges were also on the wall. They took a closer look and realized it was most likely blood. This is what made them treat everything like a crime scene. The police were on high alert. You may think that they would realize that people sometimes break things and get cuts, but that would mean they went to the hospital. And upon checking every single hospital earlier, there were no signs of the Chadwicks. The police began combing the house for evidence, and then they questioned the neighbors, trying to find some information about the missing couple. Eventually, they placed both of them, Peter and QC, into the missing persons system. But the case wasn't over by a long shot. The police also noticed that the safe downstairs was open, and money and valuables seemed to be taken out of it. They also couldn't find QC's or her 2 sons' passports that would normally be in the safe. Things started to look more suspicious. Let's talk about the family a little bit. The children were very accomplished. A neighbor stated that the boys were known as being the best at everything they did. They had good grades, participated in school activities. Her mom was determined to give them the best opportunities possible by signing them up for different activities. But even though QC seemed to be very methodical, she also liked to party once in a while. One of the neighbors remembered how excited she would get for a Christmas party every year, about what she was going to wear and what to serve. She was described as someone who was warm, nice, and comfortable to be around. Peter, on the other hand, was very shy, didn't actually like socializing. People thought that he was hard to get to know, and he seemed to keep a distance from other people. From the outside, it seemed that the family was simply perfect, and that the couple were so in love and had it all together. The entire family traveled abroad a lot. They were wealthy, and both the parents had relatives that lived overseas. Peter was actually from Britain, and QC was from Malaysia. QC came from a large family, having 6 siblings. All of her siblings ended up with master's degrees, and she was the only one who just had a bachelor's degree. This made her feel a little bit insecure, and people think that's why she focused so hard on her children's education. She resonated with wanting them to do very well. Peter worked for his father's business that developed real estate, and he ended up managing an apartment complex that he owned. Not much is known about his family. Even though they had money, they weren't flashy. They drove a Toyota minivan and a 10-year-old Lexus SUV. The two had been married for 17 years, and it seemed that they were as in love as ever. Let's get back to the case. The police continued with their investigation that evening, and while looking around, they saw the minivan in the garage, but the Lexus SUV wasn't anywhere on the property. Because this was such a private gated community, there was surveillance footage. The police saw the car leaving the community at 1:32 p.m., and there was no footage of the car returning back to the neighborhood. They also found out that Peter's phone was actually turned off since 4:30 p.m. that same day. QC's phone was actually found inside the house connected to the charger. It was in the bathroom, next to the wedding ring and her wallet. They even had the helicopters flying around trying to locate the car, and they reported to the U.S. Border Patrol about the vehicle and the couple. But things took a weird turn. The San Diego PD get a 911 call the day after the two disappeared from their home. Keep in mind that San Diego is 100 miles away from the Chadwick residence. The call was traced to a gas station, 4 miles from the Mexican border. It was Peter who called, saying that his wife was dead and that someone took her.
911 emergency, this is Crystal.
Yeah, my wife's dead.
Okay, so where exactly is she?
They took her.
Who took her?
The guy broke into my house. He drove me here. He had a friend. They've gone in a pickup truck.
Okay, so your wife did that?
She's dead.
Okay, did she die in the house and then they took her corpse?
Yeah, they killed her yesterday.
They killed her yesterday?
Yeah, we've been driving in Newport Beach.
Okay. Hold on. Let me get my supervisor on the phone. He said that his wife is dead, but someone broke into the house and stole and he took her.
Yeah,
Okay, what?
Found her.
Who is he?
Juan.
Juan? How do you know Juan?
I picked him up to look at some painting work at the house. I brought him to the house.
And when did this happen?
Yesterday, middle of the day.
Yesterday in the middle of the day. And when did she die?
Yesterday, middle of the day.
Okay, and where is she now?
Like 11. They have her body. They said they're going to cut her up.
Who has her body?
Juan and Chi.
Okay, so when she died at 11 o'clock, they took her?
Yeah. They maybe put her in the car.
How do you know she's dead?
She drowned.
What?
Her body was stiff even. I've been driving with them. They say they're going to cut her up.
What's your name?
Peter Chadwick. Mm-hmm.
Are you on any kind of medication, sir?
Not heavy one.
Okay.
It's not that.
Okay.
Because I think they're going. They might be going to Mexico or somewhere.
Okay, but this happened yesterday at 11. You're now calling us at 5:30 in the morning.
I know. I want you to get him. Yeah, they're here.
Okay, go talk to him.
He told the operator that a man broke into his house, took him and his wife to San Diego in their pickup truck, and then kicked him out of the car. The operator then asked if his wife is still in the truck he mentioned, but he kept repeating that she's dead. The operator asked how she died, but the man started stuttering. He mentioned that they killed her a day before. Then he said that they've been driving ever since. During the entire conversation, the operator was very confused about what's going on. 2 police officers meet him at the gas station after this call, and he tells them his crazy story. He says that the day before at 11 p.m., Peter was working on one of his family properties. There was some remodeling going on, and suddenly a man named Juan approached Chadwick, asking if he had any work for him that he could potentially do. Peter said that he had a full crew and didn't need any help, but if he really is in need of a job, he informed him that he needed help on a small project at his house. At this point, Juan accepts, and he drives with the man back to his residence in Newport Beach, and shows the worker a railing he needed to be fixed on the circular stairway inside the house. He leaves Juan to do the work while he went upstairs to his office. A little while later, he says that he hears his wife screaming. He went to check it out, following the noise into the bedroom, and then into the bathroom. Peter then says that he saw Juan holding his wife down by her neck and choking her, and apparently the woman was also under the water in the tub. Now tell us, if a strange man was in your house doing some work, would you take a bath without locking the door? This seems weird to us. Is Peter telling the truth? Peter allegedly tries to stop him, but the man turned out to be too strong, and he threatened Chadwick with a pocket knife. Then, as Peter was telling the story, he skipped right to the part where the strange man murdered his wife, adding that the pocket knife's blade was pretty dull. Then, Peter Chadwick said that he was forced to wrap his wife's body in a blanket and put it in the back of his SUV. Juan also instructs him to get $10,000 in cash, along with jewelry and passports. Then the murderer gets in the Lexus SUV and tells his hostage to drive, all the while threatening him with the knife. Peter then continues to tell the officers that while he was driving, he continued to beg the man to let him bury his dead wife, but Juan continued to make him drive for hours without stopping. On the road, Juan gets on the phone with his friend, and because he was speaking Spanish, Peter doesn't understand a word of what he was saying. Eventually, Juan tells Peter to stop the car. Chadwick pulls over and the two wait for the murderer's friend to arrive. The name of the friend was Chi. Chi arrived in a green Chevrolet truck. They loaded the body in that truck, took the money and valuables and left Peter there. But before they left, they instructed him to wait at the gas station until he receives a call from them on what to do next. That is, if he ever wanted to get his wife's body back. Peter waited just a few minutes and then entered the gas station, asking the attendant if he can use the phone to call 911. The police officers that arrived to meet him say that the man didn't even ask about the well-being of his sons. This seemed to be a red flag in their eyes. After Peter told them his story, they looked into his car, only to find a suitcase with men's clothes in it, and it seemed to be very messy, indicating the fact that when Peter packed it, he was in a hurry. Chadwick, after seeing that the officers found it, told them that the murderer asked him to pack a bag. Now, tell us, why would Juan ask his hostage to do so? Were they going on a vacation? After some further investigation, 5 hours later, they arrested Peter. They arrived at the station, and they take the typical mugshots of Chadwick. While doing so, they noticed that the man had several scratches on his body and on his neck. They found these wounds to be inconsistent with the story that he told. They didn't look like the wounds an attacker would inflict. In fact, they looked like defense wounds made by a victim. At the station, Chadwick mentioned that the scratches were made by Juan's pocket knife, but it was clear that the man was lying. Another lie was that Juan sat on his chest for 5 minutes, thus immobilizing him and making it impossible for Peter to administer CPR to his wife after she'd been strangled. During the interrogation, the police officers found it odd that Chadwick took so many long pauses before answering, and the fact that he would frequently cover part of his face with his hands made them believe even more that he was lying about everything he was saying to them. At this point, no one ever saw Peter in the company of another person. Not at the gas station, not at the job site, not at his house. It would come across as weird because the man clearly stated he was in the company of someone named Juan, but Peter had something to say about that. He told the police officers that Juan was always in the back seat, and that's why he wasn't seen. Things weren't quite certain as to what happened, but the police had one very intriguing lead that they needed to follow. Peter did run into a police officer that very day when everything happened. This run-in took place as he was returning to his house, presumably with Juan to fix his stairs. Peter said that he pulled over to call his wife about lunch. Then a police officer came to his car to tell him he can't park in that spot on the highway. So, the detectives needed to track down this officer that saw Peter. Fortunately, after many calls, they managed to get in contact with the patrol officer that was on highway duty that day. They talked to him, and the man said that after looking around the car, he didn't see the driver with anyone else, meaning that Peter was all alone when he said he was driving home with Juan in the back seat. After a week of investigation, the officers still didn't know where QC was, even though they had a ton of information that would point to Peter being responsible for her disappearance. They started searching some suburbs of San Diego, but they didn't have any luck in finding her. A detective and some deputies meet up in an area where some large plots of underdeveloped land were. They all split up and started to look around. One deputy went in a different direction than the rest, and he reaches the property. It was a house surrounded by a big iron gate, and right next to the gate, a large dumpster was placed. He gets closer and starts noticing a really bad smell. The man was very uneasy, but he opens the lid and starts pulling away some of the debris in the trash before something caught his eye. It was a green blanket with something wrapped inside of it. After putting it aside, the man was shocked by the sight which unfolded in front of his eyes. QC's body was finally found, wrapped in a blanket, hidden in a dumpster basically in the middle of nowhere. But one of the officers remembered something. This wasn't the only body that was found in that dumpster. The strange thing was that a year before they had found another one there. Also, another fact, the owners of the house were cleared away from any connection with the first body found in their dumpster. That incident shook them terribly, and the family moved out of their house for some time. The strange coincidence is that they've just moved back into the house, just as QC's body was found in the same dumpster. But the coincidences don't stop here. Normally, the trash would come every Thursday and empty the dumpster. Peter may or may not have known that, but he hid the body on a Wednesday. So the next day, the company should have emptied the trash, and QC's body might never have been found. It seems like the family who lived there was in some sort of feud with the trash company, and that's why they never came to pick it up. So to sum up, the only reason the poor woman's body was found was because the family didn't pay their bills and were not on good terms with the garbage disposal company. A totally unrelated thing made it possible for the police officers to locate QC's corpse. After they found her, the investigators started taking a closer look at what type of relationship did the two have, and that's when things began to unfold. Police started looking through QC's stuff in her house, and they found a note. It said from Pete's computer, and below that it had a list describing Pete's search history. It seemed that Chadwick looked up some disturbing and strange things. He searched for the cost of abortion in California, Chinese massage girl escort girl's divorce, and one that stood out, how to torture. Obviously, this information is very concerning. Then the police found out from the couple's friends that the mention of divorce came up within the marriage. And this was because QC said that her husband didn't give her attention at all. There were rumors that he was cheating on his wife. Their friends were asked why QC didn't leave her husband after finding what he had searched for on his computer. But she was apparently too concerned about her children's life and well-being to stop and think about her own happiness. So, while being in custody, the judge sets a $1 million bail. Of course, Chadwick, being very wealthy, pays it off and is released. The trial goes on for 2 years. The man makes his appearance on hearings, is cooperative. He visits his children, who at that time lived with some relatives, and it seemed that nothing stuck to him. He eventually got the Lexus SUV back from the police, after they searched every last bit of it. Peter goes to Santa Barbara and stays with his father for a while, and the only thing he does outside the house is to drive to Orange County for his court hearings. But something suddenly happens on January 16, 2015. Peter doesn't show up to court, and this specific court hearing was to decide on what the jury will base their decision on during the trial. After seeing that the man was absent, the police stated that if he missed the second court hearing, they'll issue a $250,000 warrant for his arrest. His family and lawyer had no idea where he was, so they decided to worry, thinking that he took his own life. The police started to try and find out where Peter was, and upon looking at his bank accounts to see any traces of where he might have spent his money, they noticed that they've all been drained. At that point, Peter took out all of his assets, leaving even his children with no money, not even their trust funds. The investigators took another look inside Chadwick's home, and they found some interesting books. They were on the subject of changing your identity and living off the grid, and that pretty much solidified their idea about what the man was planning to do. They actually found out that before he disappeared, he started to take test trips to try and push the limits of his court order without getting into trouble. At that time, he was not allowed to leave the state of California, but obviously it didn't stop him. Supposedly, he traveled to Seattle, Missouri, and Pennsylvania, and he was never caught. This proved that he was not monitored well at all. The police found out from a cab company that someone took a taxi from Peter's dad's house all the way to an airport in Santa Barbara. The odd thing was that the taxi driver said the person was a woman, which led everyone to believe that it wasn't Peter. But after that, they got a hold of security footage from the airport, and Peter was spotted there. This made them believe that the man dressed up as a woman so that he wouldn't be recognized until he got to his destination. In the footage, he's seen waiting in the airport for hours without doing anything else. Then after he was done just sitting around, he gets up and leaves the airport, never to be seen again. At that moment, Peter was gone, but the police still went on with the investigation. After about 5 years, police get a very important lead. They found him in Mexico. In August of 2019, he was transported back to the United States. The police accredit this to having a close relationship with the Mexican authorities. You may wonder what Peter was doing during this time. Well, Chadwick, having millions of dollars, was living the good life in Mexico. He was staying in 5-star hotels and blowing all his money away on having a good time. But a law was suddenly given in the country. Mexican authorities required all the people who stayed in high-end hotels and weren't from Mexico to have a passport in order to check in. Peter, of course, couldn't do that because there was a warrant on his head, so he decided to stay in lesser accommodations, hostels, motels, and so on. He even began picking up odd jobs, maybe because he didn't want to lose all his money and needed some sort of income coming in. It seemed that Peter started even using different names like Paul Cook and John Franklin. Upon being returned to the States and placed under arrest, Chadwick is still going through trials. If found guilty of murdering his wife, he could face between 25 years and life in prison. Now tell us, what do you think? Did the man really kill her? And was really a Juan character involved? Leave your comments down below. We'd be very interested in your take on the entire case.
I put everything into this relationship. I have done nothing to your mom. I've never hit her. I've never hurt her. I've never called her names. A couple of times when I got really mad, I would say a bad word or something, but I've done everything I can. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm like, why me? I'm so sorry.
What you've just seen is part of a video posted to YouTube by 48-year-old Trent Paschal on October 21st, 2020, moments before he murdered his wife, 30-year-old Savannah Paschal. Trent had spent years gushing about his wife's beauty on social media, but this particular video had an altogether different tone and message. Amidst apologies to his daughter, Trent explained to anybody and nobody that he had been a good husband, but one who had been played for a fool. If there was anyone who should be blamed for the horror he was about to unleash, it was his wife, Savannah. She had, after all, brought it upon herself. Before we get started, we would like to send our deepest sympathies to the loved ones of Savannah Paschal, who fell victim to the abominable acts described in this case. A stone's throw away from the city of Houston, Texas, is a small town called Lamarck, located on the edge of Galveston Bay on the Gulf of Mexico. The Lamarck City Council will tell you that life here is good. Residents can enjoy easy breezy coastal living with a relaxed lifestyle and plenty of fishing and coastal walks, and only the occasional home invasion or other petty crime, courtesy of the city's unusually high crime rate. But the crime that occurred on Hawksview Drive in October of 2020 and the year-long events that would follow it would make home robberies and other crimes in Lamarck pale in comparison. On the morning of October 21st, 2020, Donald Riddick heard the sounds of a heated argument coming from a spacious brick house located across the street from his. The home was at 400 Hawksview Drive and was that of 30-year-old Savannah and 48-year-old Trent Paschal, as well as their two children, William, aged 11, and Mackenzie, 7. Riddick had known the family for years. Their children were similar in age and had often played together on the street. While the voices coming from the house were quite clearly those of Savannah and Trent, it struck Riddick as unusual. He had never heard the couple argue before, let alone loud enough for passers-by to hear. Soon afterwards, Trent stormed out of the house and drove away in his pickup truck. Savannah followed shortly afterwards, heading to the home of a neighbor before returning back to the house. She would return at midday, this time with her mother. But by then, no one in the neighborhood was watching the house, and no one had any idea of the horrors that were about to unfold there. Savannah Kinchin Paschal had moved to the house several years earlier with her husband Trent Paschal. Born in Pasadena, Texas in 1990, growing up, Savannah had been a talented gymnast, dancer, and ice skater, and also an enthusiastic horseback rider. Her love of animals had led her to consider a career as a veterinarian. After graduating high school, she had taken up volunteer work at a vet clinic. But observing close up the suffering of the wounded or dying animals had caused a change of heart in Savannah. She decided instead to pursue a culinary career. She had scarcely started down her new career path when her life had taken an unexpected turn. Savannah was pregnant, and when the relationship with the child's father broke down, she found herself a single mom at the age of 19. For years, Savannah embraced the role of being a single mom to baby William. Later, she would find herself a lucrative new career goal, that of a funeral director. Savannah had the right temperament for working with the bereaved, a gentle touch and a natural tact. She knew just what to say and had no issues working with the dead. Life was heading in the right direction for Savannah, it seemed, and even more so when she met then 40-year-old Trent Paschal. Savannah was just 22, but Trent had his own successful contracting business and, with 18 years of extra life experience, had a comforting wisdom and a take-charge confidence that felt reassuring to Savannah. He was also smitten with the young woman, making her feel appreciated in a way that no one else ever had. There were a few small things that troubled her, his temper, for instance, and his jealousy.
Occasionally, his confidence veered into arrogance, and his protectiveness felt a little like dominance. But despite her reservations, the couple married after just several months of dating, and by a year later, baby Mackenzie was born. Looking at their Facebook profiles, theirs looked like a very happy marriage. Both profiles are full of images of them as a couple, with captions such as, "I have such a beautiful wife." One picture contains the words "forever" and "always," and "Thanks, babe, I love you so much." In 2018, Trent wrote, "Well, I'm happy Savannah still has the curves since she lost all the weight. Love you, Savannah." The reality, though, was very different, much more like the playbook of a toxic and abusive relationship. From the earliest days of their relationship, Trent had begun to restrict the people that Savannah saw. At first by questioning their characters, then by outright belittling her poor judgment in friends. A night out would be followed by sulking and intimations that she wasn't a good mother. Money became his domain and another form of control. Savannah was putting in long hours working at the mortuary while studying to become a funeral director. Every penny she earned was handed over to Trent. He didn't trust banks, so he kept the money in cash at their home. Savannah was given an allowance. He decided the amount and doled it out accordingly. Even with absolute control over her money and free time, however, Trent was still plagued by feelings of insecurity. He became convinced that his younger wife would someday leave him for another man. He took to texting multiple times an hour, asking her to prove her locations. He criticized her for wearing makeup and accused her of deliberately dressing to attract male attention. If she spoke to another man, he accused her of flirting and would show up at her workplace unannounced. Once, he discovered photos she had kept from her prom with an old boyfriend and had her tear them up. A predictable pattern of explosive fights followed by heartfelt reconciliations began. Trent had a frightening temper. During fights, Savannah would often retreat until he'd calmed down. Afterwards, he would apologize with flowers and gifts and passionately proclaim his love for her. During particularly bad fights, Savannah would call her mom Shirley for support. Trent took to restraining her from doing this. Later, knowing she would have told her mom what had happened, he'd phone Shirley to give his own version of the story. Savannah's parents watched the relationship with grim alarm. It had been obvious to them from the earliest days of their relationship that Trent had an unhealthy need to control and dominate. They had advised her to leave him. Savannah had agreed, but had fallen deeper into the relationship the longer it went on. Their fights were terrible, she admitted, but when things were good, they were amazing. That cycle, as is often the case, was only ever going to end badly. Only just how badly, no one could have imagined in their worst nightmares. And Trent was on the brink of losing control. By the autumn of 2020, the pandemic had disrupted Trent's contracting business to the point where his once multi-million-dollar company was earning less money for the family than his wife's job at a funeral parlor. The loss of status for Trent was intolerable, and his obsessive ruminations and creeping sense of losing control over Savannah reached new heights. Ironically, Savannah was slipping away. By October 2020, with Trent in control of almost every aspect of her life, Savannah had decided that she wanted out. It had been an awakening regarding domestic violence and her own status as a victim of it. Savannah had been helping raise money for victims of domestic violence. Her most recent post on Facebook from October of 2020 was a fundraiser for a domestic violence shelter. At work, we are partnering with the Bay Area Turning Point to collect items for women and children escaping domestic violence. We are a drop-off location, or you can bring them to me and I'll take them to work, now until October 25th, she wrote. Savannah was emotionally and psychologically well on her way out of the marriage. For Trent, with his limited understanding of human nature, he simply ramped up his efforts to control Savannah and installed an app on her phone that enabled him to listen to her phone calls. One evening, shortly after he'd begun listening to her calls, Savannah phoned her parents to tell them that she intended to divorce him. They warned her not to confront him, but to simply leave while he was out of the house. She insisted on having an honest and frank conversation with him. After all, she said, she owed him that much. On the morning of October 21st, Savannah broke the news to Trent that she didn't want to live with him anymore. Their conversation rapidly deteriorated into a shouting match. Trent left the house and, distraught, Savannah went to a neighbor's before returning to get her car and head to her mother's. Trent had returned to the house not long afterwards. He had made his decision and had one final task to take care of before moving ahead with his plan. He needed to record a message and post it publicly, a message that would sully his wife's reputation and hopefully salvage his own after what he was about to do. Most of the 4.5-minute long ramble that was later posted to YouTube is addressed to the daughter he shared with Savannah. He might have posted it privately to her, but instead he chose YouTube. His real audience was the general public. The key takeaway was that there was only one victim here, and it was not Savannah, but him, Trent Paschal.
I didn't choose this. Your mom chose this. She's been cheating on me for a long time. I have audio of her talking to other guys. I didn't do nothing wrong to her. When we first got together, I told her, "You're too young for me." There's an 18-year-old difference in her age, and I knew she was kind of too young, but I didn't. She's been playing me for a fool. I told her not to mess with me, not to mess with my emotions. Don't play with me. I got an audio where she was calling a guy yesterday on her way to get her eyelashes done, and she said, "Hey, baby," and he goes, "Hey," and I was like, "That's not my voice. Why is she calling somebody else baby?" Then she started talking about a dream and everything, and she had with them too about sex and everything. And I put everything into this relationship. I have done nothing to your mom. I've never hit her. I've never hurt her. I've never called her names. A couple of times when I got really mad, I would say a bad word or something, but I've done everything I can. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm like, why me? My hair's a mess and I look horrible. Oh, sorry. Take these off.
When Savannah and her mother pulled up at the house several hours later, they had no idea that Trent was still filming his pre-murder confession. He would see them via the home's security cameras, and when they were just steps away from the front door, he abruptly stopped filming. He then fumbles with the phone before scurrying out of the room in order to wait in ambush in the bathroom shower cubicle.
I love you, Mackenzie. I love you so much. Please do something good with your life. Please do something really good, because you deserve a good life. And I don't know what else to say. I'm so sorry. I don't have better words right now. I'm hurting so bad. I provided what I could. I've done what I could for her. I've done nothing but good for her. And I've treated y'all good. I've done good things for y'all. And I don't know what else to say. I love you, Mackenzie. I love you so much. Do something good with your life. Make me proud. Make me very proud. And Mom, I love you. You've been the angel through my whole life, taking care of me. Anyways, Mom, I love you so much. You're my angel. I love you. You mean everything to me. And Dad, you've done a lot for me too. And you've taken care of me. You raised me good. You've done whatever you could. Thank you. I appreciate that. I love you so much. You love me like your own.
Shortly after Savannah and Shirley entered the house, Shirley excused herself to go to the bathroom, choosing the suite off the master bedroom. Like a reverse scene from Psycho, no sooner had she closed the door than Trent emerged from behind the shower curtain, pointing a shotgun at her. Trent spoke just a few chilling words before unleashing his wrath. "I'm going to kill both you and then Savannah," he said, and then he opened fire. His opening shots missed Shirley, blew a hole in the tile wall instead. Shirley fled from the room, slamming the bathroom door behind her before managing to get out the front door, tripping several times in her efforts to reach safety. She'd nearly covered the stretch of lawn leading to a neighbor's house when she heard the harrowing gunshots reverberating through the streets. While the neighbors phoned police, Shirley watched Trent emerge from the front door, his mobile pressed to his ear. The neighbor captured him on his phone. He had just proven to Savannah who ultimately held the power, and he wanted to share the news with someone. He had called Savannah's aunt to tell her that he had just murdered her niece. He then got into his Chevrolet Colorado pickup truck and drove away. Stricken with dread, Shirley now re-entered the home. On the living room floor, she found her dying daughter, bleeding profusely from gunshot wounds to her abdomen. An ambulance would transport her to the hospital, where she would later be pronounced dead. Trent Paschal's truck was spotted by police in Houston, north of the home in Lamarck, 45 minutes later, where he was pulled over and surrounded. But Trent had no intentions of relinquishing control or being forced to face someone else pulling the strings. Why change the habit of a lifetime? As he stepped out of the truck, he pulled a gun from his waistband. Officers issued him warnings, which he responded to by pointing the weapon directly at them. Trent was shot in the arm, leg, and torso before being detained and cuffed. He was transported to a nearby hospital in critical but stable condition.
Investigators say the man shot was on the run, accused of killing his estranged wife. The murder investigation began earlier today in Lamarck. The deputy involved shooting happened tonight in the parking lot of a Walmart off the North Freeway and West Road, just south of the North Belt.
There is still a heavy law enforcement presence out here right now. Excuse me, and you can see it right behind me. Most of their focus has been back on that side of the parking lot. You can see a car and a truck back there. A lot of deputies looking over there as part of their investigation. As you were mentioning before, Harris County deputies were looking for the murder suspect out of Lamarck, and they ended up here at this Walmart after getting information that that person might be here. Now, when deputies spotted him in a different car, they then pursued that vehicle as it was heading back to what they believe was the suspect's car. They had ordered the suspect to get out. They said he had a gun, ordered him to drop the gun, but he didn't do so, and that's when he was shot by a deputy out here, shot several times and taken to the hospital. He's in last check critical but stable condition.
Here's where things get even more messed up. 6 weeks later, having been lawfully and dutifully returned back to health, Trent was released from the hospital and taken into custody at the Harris County Jail for the murder of his wife. But Trent was charged with felony murder, which made him eligible for bail. In the state of Texas, anyone other than those charged with capital murder are deemed eligible for bail. Trent's bail was set at $450,000, and he was bailed out that very night by family members. Just weeks after murdering his wife, Trent was back enjoying his life on the streets of Lamarck. He did have several conditions attached to his bond. He had to wear an ankle monitor at all times, and to not leave the county, and to stay at his mother's home from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m., and limit his movements to the store and his lawyer's office. Soon after being released, he violated the terms of his agreement by missing a court appearance. Shortly afterwards, he violated the terms a second time with a traffic infraction. On a third occasion, he was caught with different vehicle license plates on his car and had 3 more in the back seat. On all 3 occasions, his bond was not revoked, and he remained a free man. He even became so blasé that he posted images of himself on weekend getaways at Galveston Bay to his social media accounts. It was the 4th violation that prompted court officials to finally revoke his bond, but by then, it would be too late. On April 13, 2021, a small car dealership in Houston reported that one of their vehicles had been stolen at knife point. A salesman had been accompanying a man on a test drive in a black Chevy Tahoe when the man pulled over at a gas station, withdrew a knife, and ordered the salesman out of the vehicle. He then drove off in the SUV. The dealership owner hadn't taken a copy of the man's ID before allowing him to test drive the vehicle and was unable to provide police with any identity when reporting the threat. He did, however, post stills on his company's social media account of the man captured on their CCTV footage. In the comments, several people commented that the man looked uncannily like Trent Paschal, the man who had slaughtered his wife the previous October and whose face had been splashed all over the news. It was only when Trent missed another court appearance, however, that officers dropped by the house to arrest him that the shocking truth was revealed. There, on the floor, not attached to any human being, let alone Trent, was an empty, semi-destroyed ankle monitor. Trent and his stolen SUV were long gone.
This week marks 8 months since a 30-year-old mother of 2 was killed in her Lamarck home. U.S. Marshals say Savannah Paschal was shot by her husband, Trent. After a standoff with deputies, he was shot but survived and arrested, later bonding out of jail.
We don't feel that he should have been let out on bond again and again and again.
It's been a heartbreaking and frustrating 8 months for Savannah's family, made even worse after Paschal skipped bond back in April.
He has been in custody 3 separate times in the first 6 months after our daughter was killed. We warned them time and time again, don't let him back out.
You don't just vanish off the face of the earth.
Officer Chase Hunt with the U.S. Marshal Service is leading the manhunt.
The guy stands out. He's very arrogant and cocky. He's going to be out there. He's, in my opinion, a womanizer.
Officer Hunt says Paschal was last seen leaving his mother's house riding a scooter, not driving the SUV he's accused of stealing at knife point from a car dealership. Hunt thinks he's close.
My guess would be a hotel, shacked up with somebody that just hasn't seen the news.
Right now, there are no new leads.
We're on a constant state of alert. We never let the children out of our sight. We don't know what to expect, when to expect it, or where to expect it.
Paschal's bond has been revoked, and Hunt says his mother is now the victim there.
Trent, if you're out there and you're listening, you're letting your mom lose her house, and your stepdad, they took care of you their whole life, and you're gonna let them lose their house, you're gonna let them lose everything because you don't want to be a man and turn yourself in.
After a lengthy 9-month-long investigation and manhunt, police received a tip that Trent Paschal was sleeping in a van at an RV park in Florida. Police located Trent in the RV park in a stolen van on New Year's Eve 2021. As they surrounded the vehicle, a single gunshot rang out. In control until the end, at any cost, Trent Paschal had shot himself, denying Savannah's parents the opportunity to confront their daughter's killer or to see justice served. Shirley Kinchin later made a long and heartfelt statement to the press. She wanted to see her 48-year-old son-in-law stand trial. She wanted bond reform for Savannah and every other victim out there.
Did I want him to be held responsible for his actions? Did I want to look him in the eye and for him to face me again with what he had done? Yes. Am I sorry that he no longer walks on this earth? No. He is no longer a threat to my family or society. And as Andy said, we don't know who he victimized, how many he victimized. We will continue to honor our daughter's memory by fighting for bond reform and bringing light to a justice system that not only failed us and her children, but so many other victims. And there are many victims. We waited a little over a year. Many people wait decades.
She didn't meet the physical attributes of what I was looking for in a wife, but I felt like, hey, this must be the woman that God wanted me to marry. Jesus' voice talking to me about contacting the Mormon church, and he gave me information about them. I followed the instructions of the dream. I contacted the Mormon church. They sent me their Book of Mormon, and everything that I read matched the information that was given to me in the dream. Having been in the emergency field, firefighting and police, you learn to control your emotions and not let emergency situations get you startled. So yeah, I learned that, but as far as not being afraid to die, I think that's more of my relationship with God. I'm ready. Yeah, I don't mind dying at all.
This is Robert Fratta. He has been sentenced to death for a horrific crime. But to understand his crimes, we have to go back to November 9th, 1994.
Now in county, what is your emergency?
Yes, I just saw a shooting, please.
Okay, do you know if anybody's been shot?
Yes, I see the lady. I see her in her garage right now.
Is somebody shot?
Yes.
Stay on the line. Let me connect you with the ambulance service. Hold on. County.
Yes, I just saw a shooting.
You just saw a shooting?
Yes.
And what is your location?
I'm at Timbers Trail in Atascocita.
Timbers Trail?
Yes. In Atascocita. You need to send an ambulance. She's down.
All right, I just need to find out where we're going now.
There's a black man. Is he black? I don't want to say he's black.
Sir, have you done
He's
the call?
dressed in black. There's a man at her house still, and my lights are on, and I know.
Okay, have you called the sheriff's department yet?
No, I just thought
This is not what I'm waiting to transfer. If you're done with her, because we need to get out there. Very good, then. I'll have to out there. Dispatch out.
Okay, there's someone still over there.
Laura, stay on the line. Let me connect to the sheriff's department. Hold on.
Harris County Sheriff's Department.
County have a shooting. Atascocita, Nemetz en route. Go ahead, ma'am. Suspect still there.
Okay, so there's still a person out there. There's a black gentleman. He's got a black shirt and a black pants. The lady is down in her garage. She's been shot 2 times. There are 2 shots. Oh, dear. Okay. All right, and what EMS was en route? Atascocita? Yes. Oh, my God. Okay. And the suspect is still there. Where's Sky? She is in her garage. The suspect? No, the suspect is, there's a car that just pulled up. The suspect is behind a tree, and he can't see me. I have my lights up, but there's a car that just pulled up, and I can't tell what color. Okay, ma'am. Oh, God, my husband's so if I get in here. I think Darren went to see the license plate, but he can't get the license plate for the car. Okay. So if you can, will you call us back, okay? Okay. If the guy gets in the car with the license plate, babe? Can I get back in the house? Shut the door, please. Did the man get in the car? Ma'am, the black man in the house, right? Yes, a black man just got in the car there, but it was a silver car, I believe. Darren, did you know what kind of car it is? Ma'am, did you say this is Timber Trail Drive? Timbers Trail Drive, yes. It has an S on it? Let me tell you something about the car real quick. It was a silver car with 1 burnt out headlight. Hatchback. Real small Toyota.
About 6 years old.
About 6 years old.
It could be a Honda.
It could be a Honda. The lady is still in her garage. And they turned the lights out in the garage. Does the car look like it's waiting for suspect? Yes, and it already drove off. With them in there? Yes. The suspect just took off. Did you get this? Okay. No, my husband went out to look, but then I just gave you the description of the okay, well, Timbers, does Timbers have an S on it? Timbers, yes, it does. Okay, that's why it's not coming up in the computer. Okay, let me try this. I'm just very scared because I know these people just my lights are on. Do you think they saw my house? Okay. Hold on just a moment. Oh, God. Should we go over there and see her? Darren, please don't go over there. Okay. Okay, ma'am. Yes? I'm going to transfer you to Constable Precinct 4 so they can talk to you, okay? Okay. Since this isn't in progress, you might have some information that they need. Thank you. Don't go over there, sweetie. Hold on, ma'am. Okay. Darren, my roommates are going to go over there to see her. Ma'am, I have Precinct 4 on the line. Constable Precinct 4. Go ahead, sir. Okay.
Can you tell me what's going on?
Yeah, I just saw a shooting. I was in my living room nursing my baby, and I looked out my window, and our neighbor was outside her garage, and she was shot 2 times.
By a passing motorist?
No, the guy. It looked like he was either in her garage waiting for her, or I just saw his pants, and then I saw a black man, and he was dressed in black, and he was waiting, and he jumped into a car.
What kind of a car?
It was a silver car. My husband gave the 911 description, but my husband just pulled up into her driveway. He can see her, and she's down, and my husband's going right now to see if he can help her.
Okay, your husband is not armed or anything?
No. The only thing he has is mace.
Okay, did y'all see who did it?
No, all I saw was the pants, and then I saw the gentleman, but I can't give a description of the guy.
Okay, but he was in a silver Toyota?
Yes, and a hatchback there, and so it had one headlight out, or one something out. My husband knows. He's over there with her right now.
Okay, and he shot her twice?
Yes, I heard 2 shots, and I heard her scream, and I looked out my window, and my lights are on, and these people saw inside my house.
Okay,
my
you're
husband's running.
Gamble, right?
She shot in the head, my husband said. She shot in her head.
Yeah, that woman has been shot in the head, and she's still alive.
And she does have 3 children. I do not know if the children are at home.
Huh?
Okay, there's a police officer coming. I see someone coming.
Yeah,
oh, dear Jesus, help this woman.
Okay, we got a unit over there.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and you need to advise them what y'all did see, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Before we begin, we would like to send our sincere condolences to the loved ones of Fratta, who fell victim to the abominable acts described in this case. It was a quiet Wednesday evening in a suburban area of Humble, Texas on November 9, 1994. 33-year-old Fratta had just returned home from visiting the hair salon, an errand she scheduled while her 3 children were at their usual Wednesday evening with their father, Robert Fratta. After opening the garage door, Fratta was taken by surprise when a man walked through the door and shot her in the head. She screamed and fell to the cement floor. Before leaving, the intruder shot her in the head one more time and then stood behind a tree in the yard to wait for his ride, who appeared less than a minute later. Fratta was left lying in a pool of blood. What the intruder didn't realize was that he had been spotted by neighbors from across the street, Laura and Darren Holscher, who saw the whole thing and called 911. By the time police and paramedics arrived at the scene, Fratta had already lost a significant amount of blood. Police spoke with the Holschers, who provided them with a description of the shooter and the getaway car. Not long after police and paramedics arrived at the scene, Robert came driving up with the children. Detectives at the scene asked Robert to come to the police station to make a statement, which he agreed and was interviewed by police that same night. While the police investigated the scene and interviewed the witnesses, paramedics focused on getting Fratta into a chopper to get her to the hospital quickly, but it was too late. She died before she even reached the hospital. Fratta had been living alone with her 3 children after she had filed for divorce from Robert in March of 1992, something Robert was not happy about. The divorce turned ugly very fast because Fratta exposed Robert's sexual fetishes and was fighting for custody of their children. Robert was also fighting for custody. Fratta's murder occurred 3 weeks before the divorce trial. At the police station, Detective Larry Davis conducted the interrogation with Robert. Davis asked Robert where he had been during the time of Fratta's murder. Robert said that he took the children to church that evening.
But police say Fratta didn't seem surprised. His demeanor was not what you would expect from the husband of deceased, although they were going through a very bitter divorce.
During the interrogation, Davis noticed that Robert appeared smug and showed signs of deception throughout the whole process.
His demeanor was such during the interview that he was not what we'd call freely forthcoming with all his information.
What Robert never showed was emotion toward his wife's tragic death.
He showed no remorse. He showed only the fact that he was full of himself, that he was cocky, that he could beat this. That's the impression you got of Bob Fratta that day. The prosecutors wanted the last thing the jury to see was Bob Fratta winking at the camera.
How did you find your wife?
I didn't. That's where all the everything was roped off or taped off. And when I walked over, like I said, my initial reaction because nobody really looked frantic or anything like that. I mean, I guess it all had already occurred and life had already taken off, whatever. And I honestly thought there was a drug raid or something. So that's why I walked over and didn't think too much of it. And one of the constables told me.
You still have feelings for her?
It's starting to hit me now. I mean, I loved her. I mean, I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. I never wanted a divorce. I didn't do anything to warrant a divorce. Yeah, I mean, I still care about her. I mean,
Have you ever hit your wife?
I'm sorry?
Have you ever hit your wife?
Never hit her or anything else. Never even hardly raised my voice to her. That I can pretty much say I never did raise my voice to her.
Why does she want a divorce?
I guess to sum it up, basically, there was no romance and affection in our marriage. It was more like, I mean, I loved her, I provided for her, took care of her and everything, but I guess we just weren't in love with each other,
Davis then asked what should happen to someone that had their wife killed. Robert said it depended on the circumstances. At that moment, Davis believed without a doubt that Robert was involved in Farah's murder. However, without solid evidence to convict him, they had to let Robert go. After detectives received Robert's permission to search his vehicle, they found an address book and an envelope containing $1,000. Robert explained that the money was to pay for new carpeting. Detectives believed that the money in Robert's car was a clue and considered the idea that Robert may have paid someone to kill his wife.
The money was an important issue with us, and where you'd think, well, who's going to do this for $1,000? But at the same time, it could easily be upfront money to do something with a payment coming later. It could be money left over from a payment.
The detectives contacted multiple people they found in Robert's address book. Most were friends. All of these men told investigators that Robert was going around asking if there was anyone willing to kill his wife. Robert's church alibi was also investigated. Detectives found out that Robert spent the majority of that night on the phone.
Fratta had his children with him so he would have an alibi, and while he was out with his children, he knew that this was occurring. He was at church, he was visible. One thing he didn't count on, though, is that there were phone records that showed that there were phone calls made all night long between his pager, between a pager that was leased by Prystash's girlfriend at the church, and so they were communicating with each other all night while this offense was occurring.
After obtaining phone records from the church, detectives discovered that he made multiple calls to a phone and a pager owned by Mary Gipp, one call to Farah's house, and multiple calls to a payphone outside of a grocery store located close to Farah's home. Detectives spoke to Gipp, who said that she was at home with her boyfriend, Joseph Prystash, the night that Farah was murdered, and said that she didn't recall using either her phone or her pager that night. On March 1, 1995, Gipp was subpoenaed to testify in front of a grand jury. It was at this point that she agreed to tell all, as long as she was provided immunity from prosecution. Gipp explained that her boyfriend, Prystash, knew Robert from the gym. She said Robert first hired Prystash 6 months before Farah's death to break into her home and attack her, which he did using a taser gun, an incident that Farah reported to police and suspected that Robert was behind. However, at that time, there was no evidence to prove who had done it or why, so the police could do nothing. Later, Prystash found someone willing to kill Farah for money: Gipp's 18-year-old neighbor, Howard Guidry. Gipp also supplied detectives with the serial number of the gun that was used to kill Farah, and it matched a gun found on Guidry when he was arrested for bank robbery on March 1st of 1995. It also matched the bullets found at the shooting. Detectives discovered that Robert had purchased the gun. Guidry not only admitted to police that Price Stash hired him to kill Robert's wife for $1,000, he also gave a full demonstration of the event.
Whenever I killed the girl, I was at church with his children.
Where'd you get the pistol from?
From Joe. I got the pistol from Joe maybe 30 minutes before we got here. Back at the apartments, Joe gave me the gun.
Why don't you, in your own words, Howard, why don't you tell us what happened here?
Okay. I was dropped here. From here, I went across.
Sure, let's walk. We're entering the rear yard of the Fratta residence.
So I ran into the house and I sat down for approximately maybe 20 minutes. And I gave him a call from the cellular phone to the payphone. And I told him that she hadn't made it back yet. He told him just to wait it out, and I hung up the phone with him. And maybe 10 minutes after that, a car pulled in to the garage. So when the car pulled in, I came out of the little house, and I walked up to right here. And I stood right here, 38 in my hand, and I waited for somebody to come to the door, but nobody came, but I heard noises. So I creeped around like this, and I checked the door, but it was locked from the outside. So I just waited, and then when the door finally opened, I walked in, and when I walked in, I faced the woman. We was face to face, and I turned to the side like this, and we was face to face like this, and I had the gun in my hand. I pulled the gun up and I shot her once in the head, and she like fell to the side, or slumped to the side, and I started to run out, and as I started to run out, she wasn't really dead, so I turned around, and I closed my eyes and I shot her one more time in the head, and then I exited this door right here. And I turned and looked once to see if anybody was looking, and nobody was looking. So I came and I ran.
All right, if you would turn and look, face the camera.
I made the phone call to Joe to let him know that I was ready to go and it was over. And he came within 30 seconds to maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds at the most.
After talking to Guidry, detectives picked up Price Stash, who said he knew nothing, but when Lieutenant Billingsley drove Price Stash back to the parking lot where they had picked him up, Billingsley said Price Stash told him everything, including how Robert promised to give him a Jeep in exchange for his services. Police arrested Price Stash on March 13, 1995, for his involvement in Farah's murder. After gathering all the evidence against him, police were finally able to arrest Robert on charges of solicitation of murder on April 21, 1995. Robert's first trial was held in April of 1996, and a jury found him guilty of the capital murder of Farah, and he was sentenced to death by lethal injection.
I'm glad justice has prevailed, freedom has prevailed.
Victim's family wept when the verdict was read. So did Fratta's family. The defendant only stared at the table in front of him. After a long investigation, Fratta was charged with hiring a hitman to shoot his wife. The gunman's confession was read in court, which Fratta's attorneys objected to.
Are you saying this is an unfair verdict? Absolutely. No question about it in my mind.
Fratta's family declined comment, but the victim's parents, who are in custody of their grandchildren, said plenty.
The young girl, she still asks for her mother. Mommy, I love you, Mommy. I miss you, Mommy. I know you're in heaven. And someday when I die, I'm going to meet you in heaven. Now that's a lot of torture. That's a hell of a lot of torture.
In closing arguments, Fratta was portrayed as a sexual deviant. Lex Backer also called him a menace to women. Betty Backer said she wants Fratta executed.
Wait for the day when I see him laying on that table, waiting to get the injection. That'll be justice for me. I know for myself he's gone.
13 years later, Robert's case was overturned due to inadmissible evidence provided during the first trial. In 2009, Robert had a retrial and was again found guilty and sentenced to death. His sentence was carried out on January 10th of 2023.
We, the jury, find the defendant Robin Allen Fratta guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment signed by the foreman.
How could a person be capable of orchestrating a murder like this? And how could that person be so brazen as to ask if someone would be willing to help carry out the crime, then, after the murder was committed, go around smiling and winking at the camera just like nothing happened? Simply put, Robert Fratta was a narcissist.
He definitely thought he was pretty much the center of the universe, and that he could not stand the idea of a woman walking out on him. I think Bob thought he knew enough about police work, law enforcement investigations, that he didn't have anything to worry about.
Bob was very serious about working out in the gym. He was always looking in the mirror. He couldn't go past a mirror without looking into it.
He walked into the courtroom, and he came out in his suit and all that, still looking very groomed and very sure of himself.
What that test really said about Bob Fratta was nothing good. I mean, it called him sociopathic, narcissistic.
Fratta was diagnosed as narcissistic and also having an antisocial personality disorder.
A forensic psychologist with over 20 years of experience, Dr. Jeff Kolachevsky, offers an in-depth look at the mind of a narcissist.
A narcissistic personality disorder is characterized by a lifelong pattern of exaggerated feelings of self-importance, an excessive need for admiration, a severe self-centeredness, a diminished ability to empathize with others' feelings, and tendencies towards interpersonal exploitive behavior. In some of the earlier writings about narcissistic personality disorder, psychologists talked about this as a condition of psychosis, with the individual's belief about situations not always based in the reality or the facts of a situation. They often operate with a distorted reality. Their perceptions of their situations are often bent towards their own self-aggrandizement or self-centeredness.
For Robert's 2009 retrial, Dr. Ron Bailey, a board-certified forensic psychiatrist, studied Robert's medical records going back 25 years. From his study, Dr. Bailey concluded that Robert suffered from paranoia, delusional thoughts, and a mild brain impairment. He also described Robert as narcissistic. A 2018 interview with film director Werner Herzog provided more insight into the delusional mind of Robert Fratta.
Fratta loses himself in dreams and religious revelations as if a finger of God had pointed at him.
It was Jesus' voice talking to me about contacting the Mormon Church, and he gave me information about them, and it coincided with previous, what I firmly believe are revelations of God for me to write about a new government system and forming a new country. And once I followed the instructions of the dream. I contacted the Mormon Church. They sent me their Book of Mormon, and everything that I read matched the information that was given to me in the dream. And that's not something that's going to happen, especially when you have no knowledge of this at all. So in my dreams, just a part of the United States that we would, like the Christians would go ahead and just be given our own land within the United States to form our own nation called the Kingdom of Zion. And it's where we vote for a king, and the king would be a Christian king, and things would be done in alignment with the Bible. It would be a Christian nation, and we don't have that now. This country has turned us back on God.
There's a lot of evidence to indicate that Fratta had very strong narcissistic personality features, if not a narcissistic personality disorder. He was often superficial, glib. He often performed for the camera and talked about himself with a perceived self-importance. Also, he appeared to lack empathy towards his estranged wife, or how this situation would likely affect his children.
Police were quick to notice Robert's smug demeanor in 1994, according to Lieutenant Billingsley.
Bob thought he was smarter than everybody else, and he thought he was smarter than we were.
During Robert's interrogation, which occurred only hours after Farah's death, he attempted to joke with the detective.
Ever been arrested either in New York or here?
No, I didn't run that red light you did.
I'm sorry?
So I didn't even run that red light you did.
Sadly, Detective Davis, who handled the interrogation, made no effort to use this information to his advantage.
The police interrogation was completely botched. The detective did not use typical forensic interviewing techniques or strategies. The interviewer did not seem motivated to cultivate information from the suspect. And with Fratta's demonstrated narcissism, it would have been easy to get him to talk. And the more he talks, the more likely information can slip out that he would have intended to keep to himself.
As a narcissist with delusional thoughts, Robert somehow convinced himself that he had every right to rid himself of Farah, who was divorcing him and going for custody of their children, as well as for exposing his secret sexual fetishes. Even if a person is narcissistic and delusional, how can they believe that they have the right to take someone's life and believe they're not responsible for that person's death?
How could someone with severe narcissism murder someone else or arrange for someone to be murdered? Well, if their drive to meet their own desires is so intense, they can distort in their minds the facts of the situation and justify that a person needs to not exist so that their desires or wants are met. It makes sense that a severe narcissist would hire someone to murder rather than do it himself. If he has any compunction towards guilt for killing someone, then they can exonerate themselves by having someone else do the killing. Then in their own distorted mind or view, they shouldn't feel guilty. They actually did not murder the person.
Please, God. God, forgive me. I love my wife so much. She's everything to me. All I did was try to protect her.
This is 20-year-old Skylar Nemetz, an infantry soldier stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington. Skylar had just returned home from a 3-week training operation. But just hours after being reunited with his 19-year-old wife, Danielle, her deceased body was discovered by police in the couple's Lakewood apartment. Skylar would claim that Danielle had lost her life to what amounted to a tragic accident. But had it really been an accident, or had something much more sinister occurred? Before we start, we would like to send our condolences to the friends and loved ones of Danielle Nemetz, who fell victim to the harrowing events described in this case. Born 7 weeks early on January 11, 1995, Tara Danielle Rippian was described as a miracle baby. Tara, who later went by her middle name Danielle, had been born weighing just 3 pounds and was not predicted to survive the night. But Danielle had defeated those odds, and it was this inner drive and love of life that later would be remembered most by those who knew her. A flyer on the cheerleading squad, her teammates described her as a small stick of dynamite, owing to her petite frame and charismatic personality. But deep down, Danielle craved a sense of belonging. At just 2 years old, Danielle had lost her mother to cancer. She had been raised by her grandmother until the age of 14, when her grandmother also passed away. Danielle had moved in with her stepfather, Michael Bolton, but he had his own share of troubles to deal with. Her coach remembers Danielle seeking stability in the boys that she dated and their families. She'd later say, she always got very close with the families of the boyfriends she had because they were the most stable part of her life. But it was just that need to be loved. During her final year of high school, Danielle met 20-year-old Skylar Nemetz on Facebook. Skylar had recently enlisted in the Army and was due to begin basic training in Georgia. But the pair soon embarked on a whirlwind relationship. Skylar later described it as a case of love at first sight. As for Danielle, within weeks she was telling her friends that Skylar was the guy she was going to marry. None of this surprised those who knew her, but even by Danielle's standards, their relationship was moving fast. Skylar's mother, Danette Heller, remembers being taken aback when, Just a month after the pair began dating, Skylar asked if Danielle could move in with them. Danette had some reservations but eventually agreed. When Skylar returned from boot camp at their first Christmas, he took Danielle to the top of Kneeland Mountain and proposed to her. She accepted. And just 3 months later, on March 7, 2012, the same day as Skylar's graduation from basic training, the couple married at the local courthouse. Within weeks, Danielle had left school and they had relocated to Lakewood, Washington, where Skylar had been assigned his first stationing at Fort Lewis. The couple seemed to have the kind of love that most people dream of. With Skylar's encouragement, Danielle completed her final year of education at a local high school before taking a job at a granite counter company. She aspired one day to open a nail salon and began posting makeup tutorials on YouTube. The couple adopted 2 dogs and made plans to travel the world together before starting a family of their own. And they shared another passion: firearms. A favorite date night activity for the couple was an evening at a local shooting range. Skylar had grown up around guns and had fired his first rifle when he was still a kid. He handled weapons every day as part of his job. By 2014, he had 15 different customized weapons in their apartment. When Danielle turned 19, Skylar presented her with a blue AR-15 that he had customized himself. But while things may have looked perfect from the outside, those closest to the couple knew differently. Michaela Yingling had been Danielle's best friend for years, initially bonding with her over their shared experience of losing their mothers at a young age. Michaela understood more than anyone Danielle's desire to belong, but she had had her reservations about Skylar from the start. He had taken Danielle away so quickly she never had a chance to get to know him, and he seemed to have no desire to involve her in their lives. When Michaela had been expecting her first baby, he had refused to let Danielle go home for the baby shower. During her regular FaceTime calls with Danielle, she noticed that her friend was often stressed about getting the house in order for him, right down to shampooing the carpets. Another lifelong friend of Danielle's, Samantha Minton, noticed Skylar's odd behavior. When the couple came home to visit, Skylar would leave Danielle at his parents' house while he went to see his friends alone. James Peltier, who had been a father figure to Danielle growing up, said, "I met him on 3 occasions. I think I shook his hand, and then he just went back to the car and left." According to James, Skylar made no effort to form any connection with the people closest to Danielle. When she confided in him that Skylar had smashed her phone during an argument, he asked Danielle if she was afraid of Skylar. Her reply had deeply concerned him. She said, "Only when he's been drinking." And that was just what her friends had seen as well. Neighbors would later say they heard the couple arguing on a nearly daily basis. Skylar, it seemed, was convinced that Danielle was being unfaithful to him. In one text, he had openly accused her of cheating with a childhood friend. Danielle wrote back, "You have either insecurities you need to work on, or you don't trust me when it comes to hanging out with Jeremy." And Skylar's issues extended beyond the remit of jealousy. He was infuriated if she spent any money without his permission and took to tracking her spending. On September 27, 2014, Skylar had left for a 3-week-long field training operation in Yakima, Washington. Danielle stayed home with the couple's 2-bedroom apartment and their dogs. No drinking was permitted during their training. Skylar had asked Danielle to have something ready for him when he returned and made a specific request: a bottle of Sailor Jerry rum and a bottle of Fireball whiskey. It was a seemingly innocuous request, but one that would become a major player in the events that would follow. On the morning of October 16th, Danielle FaceTimed with her best friend Michaela. She was leaving shortly to pick Skylar up from the Army base, and she told her friend that she was excited to be reunited with her husband. She had already bathed the dogs and decorated the house with candles. At 4 p.m., she FaceTimed Michaela again. Michaela remembers Danielle sitting at her computer in their spare bedroom and seeing Skylar laying on the bed behind her. He smiled and waved hello. Just 12 minutes later, the following 911 call would be made by neighbors.
911, what are you reporting?
Hi, I think somebody was shot, our neighbors. We heard a lot of banging, our neighbors were making a lot of noise, and then went to check. He said his rifle was out and there was an accident. He said her name's Danielle.
Danielle was the one that shot, and he accidentally shot her?
I don't know that part. We just heard the gun go off, and he said there's an accident.
Okay, is she breathing at all?
Is she breathing? Is she breathing? No.
And you said you don't know his name?
No, I don't.
Can you ask him his name?
What's your name? Skylar.
You hear someone screaming?
I'm their neighbor, and I heard a shot go off, and I wasn't sure if it was shot or anything else. The husband has said that she's dead, and he doesn't want me going in to see her. It was a accidental discharge because the round was in a rifle.
So the male told you that his wife is dead?
Yes.
Okay.
So she accidentally shot herself, is that correct? Or what you've been told anyway?
She accidentally shot herself.
The husband does not want to talk about it. So we just need somebody here.
Yeah, we have been notified, it sounds like, from somebody else. Do you guys know where that rifle is now at all?
I didn't ask.
Skylar told his neighbors that Danielle had accidentally shot herself while cleaning her rifle. He would not let anyone see her and refused to talk to the 911 operator. Thomas Rodriguez, the chief of police for the town of Stellicum, along with 2 other officers, were the first to arrive on the scene. In the spare room of the couple's apartment, he found Danielle sitting at her computer with her head slumped on one shoulder, a large pool of blood beneath her chair. She had been shot at close range in the back of the head and was pronounced dead at the scene. Outside, he found Skylar slumped on the bumper of his car. According to Rodriguez, Skylar's face was contorted and he was making sobbing sounds. But when he looked up at Rodriguez, his eyes were dry and he said, "I don't know why I can't cry." Skylar had already explained to Officer Darrell Moore that he had been taking the magazine out of his rifle when it had gone off against his leg, striking Danielle as she sat at her desk. He insisted that he had not seen the single bullet that was in the chamber of the rifle. This, however, was different from the account he had given to his neighbors, but it would just be the second account of many. Skylar repeated the story to Rodriguez. He said he had only shaken the rifle. I just shook it and it shot her. At 6:07 p.m., Skylar was arrested and placed in the back of a patrol car, where he was informed that he was being recorded on camera, both audio and visual. A morose and silent Skylar would then launch into a bizarre monologue that would last the entire journey to the police precinct, a full 35 minutes. Later, people would comment that Skylar's antics, at times he was sobbing, at other times shouting, seemed more like a performance than a genuine expression of grief. He also seemed to be able to snap out of his grief any time an officer addressed him.
You call and come forward. Just please be as patient as you can. So, okay? Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. Hey, sir, were you notified you're being audio and visually recorded?
That's fine. I'm not going to do anything.
Okay. Just so you know, you're on camera, okay? Have you been advised of your Miranda rights?
No.
Okay. Just hang tight, okay?
You.
Once at the station, detectives would interview Skylar for nearly 5 hours.
So I took the rifle and I took the magazine out. And I don't know what the fuck happened. Like, I didn't charge it. I didn't pull the trigger or anything. I hit the safety. I turned the safety from safe to semi because I was about to charge it to make sure it was clear. Even though when I gave it to her, I knew it wasn't around. So here, I think that when I was gone, she might have put a round in the chamber, maybe, not knowing what she was doing. And so I don't know what the fuck. I did not pull the trigger, and the magazine was not on the weapon. I put the weapon on fire. It was on fire, so it had the probability of firing the weapon. And I don't know how the fuck it went off, but it went off.
Inconsistencies in his account began to appear immediately. Skylar first tells detectives that he left Danielle's rifle in the closet with the magazine far away from the rifle. Then he states that when he had decided to put the rifle back in the safe, he had begun by removing the magazine. The same magazine he had just said was kept far away from the weapon. Skylar is made to repeat his version of the events. With each reiteration, he loses a few details and introduces others. Now it was Danielle who had asked him to put the rifle away.
30 minutes before this all happened, she took it from the closet into the office.
Okay.
And she said, I don't need this anymore, just put it away.
About one aspect, though, Skylar seemed certain: the moment the gun discharged. He demonstrates to detectives how he was moving the rifle when it went off. Detectives asked if they were going to find any digital forensic evidence that Skylar and Danielle were having marital problems. With Skylar's clothes taken away for forensic testing, detectives now confront him with the news that the trajectory of the bullet does not match his account of the events.
I really have no problem
Because
with
your
that.
story doesn't make sense. There's a huge fucking gap in your story. You're detailed all the way through up until the point where we had to talk to you for 2.5 hours to get you to realize that we're smarter than you think, and you shouldered a weapon because the fucking trajectory of that fucking round didn't match up. So immediately you changed the fucking story. That's about the 8th time you've done that. When your story, about 8 times, when your story doesn't make sense and you hear it for the 2nd time and we bring something up, you change the story. I'm trying to figure out why you put a gun to the back of your wife's head and pulled the trigger.
Skylar offers a revised version to the detectives, this time admitting that he not only pulled the trigger, but that it was no accident. He just didn't know the gun was loaded.
Me firing the weapon, or me pulling the trigger was not an accident. Okay? I did not know there was a round in there. Her getting hit with that round, it was an accident, and I was not mad, I was not angry.
Okay, so tell me what happened.
I was holding the weapon, I took the magazine out, okay? I took the fucking magazine out, I put the weapon on fire, and I pulled the trigger.
Seeking a motive, detectives now asked Skylar about a receipt found in the apartment for a dozen roses. Skylar sticks to his story that he pulled the trigger without intending to kill Danielle. But other witnesses were soon to come out of the woodwork. The day after Danielle's death, a woman named Carrie Foss turned up at the police station claiming to have information about the incident. Carrie was the wife of Anthony Foss, a friend and colleague of Skylar's. Carrie told police that throughout the time she had known the couple, Skylar had subjected Danielle to continual domestic abuse. Danielle had taken to wearing long sleeves to cover up the bruises up and down her arms. Carrie described Skylar as so controlling that at certain points, he had banned Danielle from even leaving their apartment. As for the co-worker whose wife had been the recipient of the roses, that had been Danielle's boss, Michael Newton. Carrie recalled Danielle telling her about Michael the first time that she had met him. Danielle confessed that she found him attractive, but that, as far as Carrie knew, had been the end of it. Not for Skylar, though. Skylar had been convinced that Danielle was having an affair with Michael. When Skylar had returned from training, he thanked Anthony for buying the alcohol, only to discover that it was Michael Newton who had bought it instead. Carrie described seeing Skylar visibly shaking with rage. Carrie had also told police that during the 3 weeks that Skylar had been away, Danielle had met up with an old school friend by the name of Jeremy Henry. She told Carrie about the meeting over text, and Carrie believed that her husband Anthony had seen the messages and told Skylar. Detectives now spoke with Anthony Foss. Anthony admitted that he had been aware that Skylar had been violent with Danielle and that he and a former squad leader, Sam Phillips, had warned him that if it didn't stop, they would take action. Police then spoke to Danielle's boss, Michael Newton, as well as her old friend, Jeremy Henry. Michael explained that since Danielle was the company's first hire and he was the manager, he had been in frequent contact with her, but their relationship had never been anything more than strictly professional.
So did the relationship become more than just a working relationship?
No, not at all.
Okay.
We never did anything together whatsoever.
In his interview with police, Jeremy Henry admitted the last time he'd seen Danielle was the previous Wednesday night.
So you said 2 times you spent the night in the last 3 weeks over there?
Yes, sir.
And you were over there Wednesday night prior, but you didn't spend the night?
No, sir.
Okay. Were you over there any other nights other than the 2 that you spent in the 3 weeks?
I went to the mall there one time.
Pierce County prosecutors now felt they had enough evidence to charge Skylar. Skylar had admitted to picking up an AR-15 and pulling the trigger while the rifle was pointed at the back of his wife's head. With the evidence of abuse, his failure to call 911, and his attempt to hide the evidence, prosecutors charged Skylar with first-degree murder of Danielle Nemetz. Skylar was held in the Pierce County Jail under a $1 million bond. Upon hearing the news, his mother, Danette, had sold her house, her car, and her jewelry to pay for his bond before hiring a top-notch defense attorney. While on house arrest in the lead-up to the trial, Skylar spoke to 48 Hours.
She doesn't have a car anymore. I mean, that's all because of me. And yet, at the same time, she wants to do this. I mean, I did have to explain to my mom that what I did was, in the state of Washington, classified as negligence.
And then, a year and a half after shooting his wife, Skylar Nemetz went on trial. The prosecution presented the jury text messages between the couple that revealed their constant arguments. Skylar, they said, was someone with an in-depth knowledge of firearms. He had fired his first gun at the age of 4, his first AR-15 at 11, and by the time he was a teenager, he was building and assembling his own. Skylar could not possibly have made such a basic error as pointing a weapon at someone and pulling the trigger. A forensic scientist from the Washington State Patrol examined the weapon that had killed Danielle. He tested the functioning of the rifle and the cartridge and performed a trigger pull analysis. The results came back as typical for a firearm of that type. He stated that pulling the trigger with one finger would be comparable to lifting a 3/4 gallon of milk with one finger. Numerous witnesses testified for the prosecution against Skylar, claiming to have personally witnessed the evidence that he had abused Danielle. Finally, it was Skylar's turn to defend himself. Skylar's testimony closely echoed the story he had told police during his interrogation. This time, though, he added that he had screamed Danielle's name after shooting her, and that, if it hadn't been for his neighbors pounding on his apartment door, he would have taken his own life out of distress. When asked why he hadn't rendered any form of aid, he claimed that he already knew she was dead. The prosecutor probed Skylar about the alcohol use and why, instead of holding his dying wife, he had chosen instead to get rid of the evidence by flushing the alcohol down a toilet. To this, Skylar got emotional, telling the jury that he wished he had done things differently.
For some stupid apparent reason, I thought alcohol needed to be poured out, which is... it was completely stupid. I don't know why. If I could have done what I wanted, if I could go back and do what was right, I would have sat there and held her. And I would have prayed.
Skylar's fingers had allegedly been injured during the process of pulling the trigger. Prosecutors argued that the blood residues he had left around the apartment showed he had been in no hurry to get help or to answer the door to his neighbors.
You left a considerable amount of blood at various locations within this apartment after you were injured, correct?
I saw the pictures.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's when it happened, correct?
As far as I know, I did not see the injury until I was in my interrogation. And I know that because in my interrogation I see myself looking at it.
Did you just testify that you injured your finger in the firing of that weapon?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So we know that only after you fired the weapon would you have left a blood trail in that apartment, correct?
Yes.
All right. And among the areas that you left blood was what's called a spatter, I guess, technical term, but a significant amount of blood around the door frame of your bedroom. Correct?
I believe so.
Okay. And we also know that you left a smear on the top of the refrigerator in the kitchen, correct?
Yes, I've seen that picture.
Okay. And you also left a smear by the slider, correct?
Yes, I've also seen that picture.
And that would positively indicate areas that you went before you ever answered the door, correct?
Yes, possibly.
Possibly? Did you go to the slider after answering the door?
I do not remember.
You don't remember?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You remember pulling the trigger?
No, I do not.
Don't remember that either.
In a closing argument to the jury, Skylar's defense attorney, Michael Stewart, reiterated Skylar's claim that the shooting of Danielle Nemetz had been unintentional. Skylar may be guilty of manslaughter, but not premeditated first-degree murder. The jury returned with a verdict on March 3, 2016, after 7 days of deliberation. Skylar was found guilty of manslaughter, but cleared of first-degree murder. The jury had not believed the state's case that Skylar had intended to kill his wife. Skylar Nemetz was sentenced to 13.5 years in prison for the taking of the life of his wife, Danielle Nemetz. He will be free by 2029. This case is dreadfully tragic. A man brutally murdered his wife by hitting her repeatedly with a baseball bat. Then, 2 weeks later, he suffocated his 2 young stepsons. But his murdering streak did not end until 4 weeks later, when he drowned his 2 little girls in a bathtub. Why did he do it? And why did he keep the bodies in the back of his van for weeks after he killed them? Before we start, we would like to send our sincere condolences to the loved ones of Casey Jones and her 4 children who fell victim to the abominable acts described in this case. Welcome to Summerfield, a small unincorporated community located in Marion County in Central Florida. Meet 32-year-old Casey Jones and her 4 children, 10-year-old Cameron Bowers, 5-year-old Preston Bowers, 2-year-old Mercalli Jones, and 1-year-old Ayana Jones. She was a very caring and thoughtful woman, the type of person who would give a complete stranger the shirt off her back. She loved caring for animals, especially dogs, as a veterinary technician and groomer up until back problems forced her to become a stay-at-home mom. But most of all, Casey was a devoted mother and wife who always put her family first. Especially her children. Her social media pages were filled with images and videos that portrayed a big, happy family. No one could have predicted what would come to pass during the fateful summer of 2019. During that summer, the children spent time with extended family, the little girls with Casey's mother, Nikki Jones, and the boys with their biological father, Richard Bowers, Casey's ex-husband. It was on August 1st when Nikki received an unexpected message from Casey asking if she could watch the girls, Mercalli and Ayana, for a few days. Nikki thought it was odd when Michael showed up to drop the girls off instead of Casey, but didn't think too much of it at the time. A few days later, Nikki received another message from Casey stating that she was sick and asked if Nikki could hold on to the girls for a little longer. She had the 2 girls for 2 weeks before Michael showed up to take the girls home. During the time that she had Markali and Ayana, Nikki received no messages from Casey other than asking her to watch the kids for a bit longer. This was unlike Casey, who would normally check up with the children quite frequently whenever they were in someone else's care. Still, nothing about the girls or Michael's behavior gave off any indication that something was wrong. More time went by, and the boys' birthdays passed without Nikki or her other two daughters, Sarah or Brandy Gilbert, receiving a single phone call or message from Casey, which was not like her at all. She usually made a big deal over the children's birthdays and always included her extended family in the celebrations. On September 14, 2019, Nikki, Sarah, and Brandy realized that weeks had passed since anyone had actually heard from or seen Casey. In addition, Casey had not been active on her social media. Panicking, Nikki first thought that it was Michael that must have killed Casey, but Brandy and Sarah thought their mother was overreacting. They believed a more reasonable explanation that Michael was probably running from the law again, so Casey's family could be in hiding. Michael had been arrested multiple times in the past for burglary and grand theft. Back in 2015, Michael had gone into hiding after stealing money, a gun, and computer equipment from the Mount Dora Animal Hospital, where he and Casey worked as veterinary technicians. During that incident, Casey supported Michael financially when he fled to New Mexico to avoid being arrested, so no one in the family would have been surprised to hear that Michael was running from the law again. Still, Nikki was not convinced. Fearing for the safety of her daughter and grandchildren, she called the Marion County Sheriff's Office and asked for a well-being check on Casey. Deputy Chase King went by the Jones residence to check on the family, but the home was vacant and had recently been cleaned out by the landowner. King spoke with one of the Jones neighbors who said that he was asked by the property manager to accompany one of the maintenance employees over to the Jones house to investigate a strong and foul odor coming from the mobile home. The neighbors said that it smelled as if something had died in that house.
Was there anything else out of the ordinary that you noticed?
Just that plastic on the back.
What plastic?
It looked like it had plastic on the back of where the window is.
Okay, like the windshield?
Yeah, like the back glass.
Was replaced with plastic, or there was just plastic over it?
It looked like it had plastic right there. Like plastic.
Are you talking about like see-through plastic?
Yeah,
like
but it wasn't see-through. But it was
kind of like an opaque saran wrap.
It was like it was a plastic, but not see-through.
My lieutenant's on his way. I don't know if he may want to talk to you. He may just talk to me and see what information I've gotten from you. Is there any other information you might be able to give me that would be helpful?
That's all I know.
Okay.
It went that way.
Towards Sharps Ferry, and then he went towards Baseline, right?
Toward Baseline.
And you're positive you turned left on Sharps Ferry?
Turn left.
Okay. Like I said, I do appreciate your time. If you wouldn't mind just hanging out for a minute, my lieutenant's on his way here. He's somewhere on this road. He's just got to find a spot here, so...
On top of the bad smell emitting from the home, King noticed a small red stain on one of the bedroom floors as he peeked through the windows. After discovering the red stain, King called Sergeant Micah Moore to come and help him investigate the house further. With the property manager's permission, King and Moore entered the home. The smell permeated throughout the home, and they recognized it as the smell of human or animal decomposition. King and Moore noticed one of the bedrooms had a new parquet floor and baseboards installed. When they questioned the property owner about the repairs, they were immediately told to leave. Without a search warrant, there wasn't anything more they could do. So King and Moore contacted two more investigators. They briefed them on the situation, and they promptly began searching for and contacting family members of both Casey and Michael. With no clues to trace Casey or Michael's whereabouts, the sheriff's office posted a missing and endangered advisory on the morning of September the 15th for Casey and the children, and began working on getting a search warrant for their Summerfield home. During that time, the sheriff's office received a phone call from Casey's ex-husband, Richard Bowers, who had just discovered that the boys and Casey were missing. Bowers had picked up the boys from Michael on July 27th. It was always Casey who met up with him to drop off the boys, so Bowers was surprised to see Michael instead. Since he had recently fought with Casey over getting the boys for the summer, he chalked it up to Casey not wanting to see him and thought no more about it. Bowers kept the boys until August the 10th. Upon returning the children to Casey again, it was Michael who showed up. As Bowers was dropping off the boys, Michael took him by surprise by apologizing to him. Apparently, Casey had been telling Michael that Bowers was abusive towards her and the children when they were together. Michael had since realized that Casey was lying and felt the need to apologize for believing all of the things that she had told him.
And I told him, and he remembered this saying, a few years afterwards, because he even quoted it to me. And this was as, I was bringing them to Georgia. But before we left the mall parking lot, when I had picked them up for the first time, he had said, Richard, I just want to tell you, you told me something a few years ago that rings in my ears. And I had told him, I said, when we were in our altercation, I said, brother, I said, you freed me from 13 years of hell. Yeah. And I said, thank you. And he reiterated that to me. He reminded me of that. He said, I want to tell you that I never forgot those words that you told me, because I know now what you meant to this very day. And, he just kind of gave me a brief history of, everything that he's put her through, about how if there's an 80-year-old woman walking down the street, he's got to hold his head down because she would accuse him of, trying to have sex with her, or pretty much any female, because that's what it was with me. Mm-hmm. But the part that was weird, sir, is he was really cool with me, like he was my homeboy or something, like we were best friends. And that's, I guess, it never dawned on me, of course now it does, but it never dawned on me at that moment that, it's almost like that was his apology for everything that he had done. And here I was, I took it hook, line, and sinker, because I'm a forgiving guy, I want to try to see the best in people. And I ate it up, and we even hugged, he shook my hand.
Though this apology, along with Michael's sudden friendly behavior towards him, was shocking, like Casey's family, Bowers didn't pick up on any clues that Michael was giving him that might lead him to believe that something was wrong. Bowers didn't realize anything was amiss until he saw the missing and endangered advisory for Casey and the 4 children on Facebook. That was when he called the Marion County Sheriff's Office. Hours later, Detective Bartlett discovered Michael Jones was involved in a single-vehicle crash in Georgia that same day. When police arrived on the scene, Michael immediately confessed to killing both Casey and the children.
41-year-old Michael Wayne Jones was arrested in Georgia in September of 2019 after a single-car crash. According to arrest documents, a deputy noticed a bad odor coming from the car, and when he asked Jones about it, Jones said his wife Casey's body was inside the vehicle. Jones then took investigators to a wooded area where he had disposed of the children's bodies in totes and suitcases. Detectives say Jones told them he first killed his wife with a metal baseball bat. He then killed each child on different days and times by strangling or drowning them.
Who is Michael Wayne Jones? We don't know all of the details of Michael's past. He was born in 1980 and grew up in Vermont. He lived with his mother and father until his father was sent to prison for reasons that were not disclosed. Eventually, his mother remarried, and Michael's stepfather turned out to be abusive. At some point during his childhood, Michael was the victim of sexual abuse, but we don't know by whom. Michael grew up struggling with depression. He was prescribed the antidepressant Wellbutrin, which is used to treat major depressive disorders. We don't know when he started taking the medication, but he was definitely taking it in the year he murdered his family. Though Michael had stayed in touch with his mother throughout his life, they were never able to establish a healthy relationship. For 5 years, Michael was in the United States Navy and also served with the Marines in the medical field. Not long after getting out of the military, Michael married his first wife, Sarah. The couple had 3 children together. For work reasons, the family decided to move to Central Florida around 2011. Sarah got a job working at the Mount Dora Animal Hospital in Orange County. Eventually, Sarah talked the owners into giving Michael a job at the clinic as well. Michael had a positive reputation at the vet clinic and was well liked by the owners and staff. In 2014, Casey Jones, then having the last name Bowers, was hired to work as a veterinary technician. It wasn't long before Michael and Casey had an affair, and both ended up getting divorced from their first spouses as a result. In 2015, Michael's true colors began to show. The owners of the vet clinic realized Michael was manipulative, deceptive, and had been making sexual advances towards female staff. After learning of all of this, the owners fired him. In retaliation, Michael snuck into the clinic and stole the items that we mentioned previously. Though Casey witnessed Michael's manipulative and deceptive personality, she stayed with him, and they were married on Halloween in 2017. Mercalli Jones was born the same year Michael and Casey married. Ayanna was born the following year. Less than a year after Ayanna was born, Michael would murder his wife and all 4 children. On July 10th, Michael and Casey got into a heated argument. According to Michael, Casey accused him of cheating and came at him with a baseball bat. She pushed him with the bat, and then Michael pulled it from her hands and began to strike her repeatedly until she died. Michael took her body and hid it in his bedroom. At some point, Michael made the decision to kill the boys, Cameron and Preston, after he got them back from their father. They returned home from their father's house on August the 10th. Between that day and August 22nd is when Michael murdered them. He targeted Cameron first, strangling him with his bare hands while holding him down with his knee against the boy's back. The following night, he went after Preston. Taking a zip tie, Michael tightened it around the young man's throat and waited for him to die. Michael would tell investigators that he chose to use a zip tie on Preston because his hands were sore from strangling Cameron the night before. On August the 28th, Michael decided to kill the 2 girls, his own children, as well. Filling up the bathtub, he took the girls one by one and held them under the water until they drowned. Michael placed all of the bodies in bags and totes and used cat litter to clean up. At this time, Michael was facing eviction and was going to be forced to move out at the end of August. He had to find a place to go quickly. During Labor Day weekend, Michael phoned his ex-wife, Sarah. He said that he and Casey had split up, and Casey took the children and went to her mother's house. To Michael's convenience, Sarah asked him to stay at her house in Jacksonville so that she didn't have to be alone during the upcoming Hurricane Dorian. Before heading to Jacksonville, Michael placed all of the bodies in the back of the van and then drove to Sarah's house. Michael stayed with Sarah until she received a phone call from the Marion County Sheriff's Office asking if she had seen Casey or Michael. Michael told her to tell the police that she had seen Casey and the children, and she obeyed. At that point, Michael realized it was time for him to leave and took off that afternoon and headed towards Georgia.
So, obviously, you were staying with Sarah. Were you with her last night?
I was up there, yes.
Okay. Up there at her place?
Yeah, up in Jacksonville.
Is she staying in apartments?
Yeah, she
Okay.
has apartments.
Did you guys hear my phone call and stuff last night? What was the deal with all that?
She woke me up early morning and asked me what was up with, is there any reason why Marion County would be, looking for you? And then I just tried to spin stuff, and finally I said, let me just get on the road. So.
Did you tell her what the heck was going on?
No.
She told us that when she talked to me this morning, you were still there. Is that true?
When she spoke to you on the phone, yeah, I was there.
What was going on?
Just trying to figure it out.
You were trying to figure out what I had going on, and
yeah.
Okay. Did she talk to you? Did you tell her what to say to me, or?
No, I one point she thought it was looking for just me, and so I said, you've seen me or whatever, you've seen Casey, you've seen everybody, So yeah, I guess I did tell her.
Okay, so basically, what was the deal with the McDonald's?
McDonald's.
She mentioned something about being at McDonald's. She met you at McDonald's on Friday or something to exchange the kids.
Oh, that's usually a meetup spot.
Okay, so that's your usual meetup spot.
We're going halfway.
So, after that phone call, how long after that phone call do you leave?
I don't think I left out of Jacksonville until like 3.
Okay. Yeah. So you were there for a while. After I called her the first time, I mean, did you ever tell her exactly what was going on, or you just kind of, I got to get out of here?
Yeah, I just told her I got to get out of here.
Did you get out of there after I called the second time?
Around that time, yeah, because she'd come back. She left the house and come back. And we talked about, she said, well, why'd you have me tell them this? And, they're calling me back. I said, well, let me try and go deal with it. So.
And you called me, right?
I did call you.
Why didn't you come? What do you think was going to happen today after you left? What was the plan?
Between September 1st and September 14th, Michael had all 5 bodies stashed in the back of his van while staying with Sarah, who was completely unaware. Once he entered the state of Georgia, Michael took the children's bodies and hid them in a wooded area near the highway. But for some reason, he left Casey's body in the back of the van. Not long after getting back on the road, Michael ended up swerving off the road and crashed his van while checking his GPS. Michael received minor injuries from the crash and made the choice to call 911. When police arrived, he made no attempt to hide Casey's body. He immediately told police that he had murdered his wife and that he had her body in the back of the van. Michael also told police about the 4 children, what he had done, and where he hid the bodies. Michael was arrested and taken in for questioning. During the interrogation, police were surprised to find Michael calm, collected, and cooperative. Michael was first interrogated at a Georgia police station. During that interview, Michael stated that he had murdered Casey. He had pretended to be her by using her phone to send messages to family members.
I had her phone for a while, and I would text and pretend to be Casey. And
what's Casey's phone number? So then you're answering text messages back and forth, and
yeah, so.
He also created posts on Casey's social media accounts to give the impression that she was still alive.
So you're pretending this whole time to be Casey obviously on Facebook too, because you got some like collages that you made or something on Facebook and posted them. And
Michael told investigators he considered turning himself in before he had murdered his daughters. He sat parked in front of the City Hall in Marion County, Florida for quite some time.
Up by the City Hall, looking down at the police department, which I believe is Marion County Police Department.
Okay.
I sat there for several hours with my daughters and turned myself in,
What stops you from turning yourself in? Just this basic fear that, you're going to end up in the situation you're in right now?
Yeah.
But in the end, he chose to take the girls' lives and tried to run. Once the police in Georgia were done with Michael, he was returned to Marion County, where he went through another interrogation. During this interrogation, investigators asked Michael if he had ever physically abused the children, which he denied. However, he mentioned that Cameron and Preston's biological father had.
During our investigation, somebody mentioned some incidents that happened with the boys previously. Have there been any, issues where you disciplined the children or anything like that and it got out of hand?
Mm-hmm.
How would you discipline the boys?
Most of the time I would separate them, go to the room, but sometimes I'd spank them on the butt.
Okay.
Other than that, that was it.
Would you ever spank them with anything besides your hand?
No.
Okay.
Hell no.
There was mention that the boys were disciplined. I don't know if it was a spanking or something. I know that when I was a kid, I'd get spanked with a belt.
Yeah.
Did you ever spank the kids with a belt?
No. I've had that happen. No.
No switch from the tree, nothing like that?
No old school, none of that. It was just a hand.
Somebody mentioned maybe a clothes hanger?
Nope, but that would have been something that happened when they were with their father.
Tell me about that.
A couple of years ago, he was investigated. He had the kids for the weekend. It was Halloween, around Halloween, and the boys came back in their costumes, and the oldest, Cameron, had a Batman costume, like a one-piece. And, you know, he's autistic and he has trouble, like, putting, you know, so it's like, hey, take this off. So I undid it. As soon as I did, he was going pee, you need to go pee. So I hollered to his mother, and he had bruises all over his lower back.
Really?
Yeah, real bad. And it was investigated in Lake County. We lived in Eustis at the time, and they did investigations, and I told her she was going to, you know, there was going to be an arrest made. It never happened. You know, it kind of fell through the cracks. I'm not really sure exactly how, you know, what went on with it, other than that I guess he got an attorney, and you know, he said it might have happened on a bounce house or something like that. But
okay, so that was all kind of pushed to the side and went away.
Yeah.
Throughout the interrogation process, Michael was asked why he murdered his wife and the children, especially his own little girls, Mercalli and Ayana. He said his relationship with Casey gradually became more and more hostile.
What's you guys' relationship like? I mean, is this an ongoing thing where you guys are at each other like this, like fighting, or?
It just got worse. Like, you know, little things all the time with her. She would come at me, and we'd argue, and never really got physical.
When Casey came at him with the bat and accused him of cheating, he just lost it. After murdering Casey, why did he decide to go after the children? Why didn't he just leave them with family members? Empty prescription bottles and alcohol containers in the home show that Michael could have been under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or both when he murdered any one or all of his victims. But he never claimed to be under the influence of either during his interrogations. The trial began on December 8th, 2022, at the Marion County Judicial Center. Michael was tried for second-degree murder in the death of Casey and first-degree premeditated homicide for the death of the 4 children. Since he had admitted to murdering his family, his trial went directly to the penalty phase. Michael may spend the rest of his life in prison or may face the death penalty.
True evil poked its head up here in Marion County. That's about the only best way to describe it. As a father, as a parent, it breaks my heart. As a sheriff, it angers me to no end. Now, as far as I'm concerned, as the sheriff of this county, underneath the jail ain't good enough. He has no right to walk the face of this earth. I hate to be him when he stands before the Lord.
I have never been a fan of the death penalty, but to be very honest with you, these are those cases where I would much rather that happens than that he sits somewhere.
On December 12th, the state attorney rested their case, stating that he wants Michael to receive the death penalty, and so do a few others. The state attorney explained to the jury how, in detail, Michael had brutally killed each and every member of his family without remorse. While the state attorney works hard to get Michael the death penalty, the defense attorney is fighting to keep Michael alive and have him spend the rest of his life in prison instead. The defense is scheduled to make their case in January of next year. He plans on calling 18 witnesses to the stand to prove that Michael deserves life and that his actions were the result of years of trauma he had suffered as a child and later the multiple relationships that he had as an adult with dominating and abusing women. The defense is referring to Michael's actions as a freefall of psychotic chaos brought on by a lifetime of abuse. The defense also believes the jury should take into consideration the fact that Michael willingly confessed to the murders of Casey and the children and even provided the location of the bodies instead of trying to cover it up on the day that he was involved in that accident. After all, it was Michael who had called 911 after the car accident, knowing he still had his wife's body in the back of his van with the strong smell of decay emanating from it. In Florida, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence says 37.9% of women and 29.3% of men experience domestic violence. According to the Florida Department of Children and Families, domestic violence cases were on the decline in 2018. However, the numbers began to rise again in 2019, the year Casey and her children were murdered. The lockdown during the COVID-19 pandemic caused the amount of domestic violence cases to rise even more during the following year. In 2019, the department had 105,298 documented cases of domestic violence, ranging from what would be considered simple stalking to criminal homicide. In 2020, the numbers went up to 106,615, which was the highest number of cases since 2017. The NCADV says 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence. During his interrogation, Michael admitted that he murdered Casey after putting up with years of abuse from her. He couldn't take it anymore and lost it. But it's hard to know for sure if this is true, since he has a history of being deceptive and manipulative. Is he just trying to gain some sympathy? According to Casey's sister Sarah, Casey and her siblings grew up in a violent and unstable household. All 3 girls were physically abused by their mother. Sarah says that their traumatic childhood led all 3 girls to grow up with the ability to become vindictive and aggressive, and she wouldn't be surprised if Casey was abusive towards Michael if provoked. During Michael's interrogation in Georgia, a detective mentioned that one of Michael's employees had complained about the numerous calls and messages Michael constantly received at work from Casey.
He said that you were getting phone calls all day long and text messages all day long from Casey, and
Oh, that would be Phil, probably.
yeah.
I worked for him for a couple of years. No, Eric.
Okay, so that was Eric's the new boss. Okay.
Yeah.
Casey's ex-husband, Richard Bowers, also said to Marion County investigators that she was physically and verbally abusive towards him during their 10-year marriage.
I remember a time when we were back in Indiana, it was only Cameron at the time, who was my oldest. He was on the couch, and I was on the phone with my mom, just talking to her, and, she comes up behind me, rips out the phone cord, grabs a knife, chases me around the whole townhouse. I run upstairs. I mean, keeping granted this is in the winter time, up in northern Indiana, so it's cold. I had to open up a window, please. I mean, I was screaming, for my life. And, the cops came. I remember one of the officers said, "Are you sure she's all right?" I said, "No, she's got, some issues." But, I mean, how much do you want to know? I mean, I could tell you everything,
Though Casey was abusive towards him, the couple did not divorce until after the affair between Casey and Michael. Richard Bowers never claimed that Casey was abusive towards the children, and he did not try to take sole custody of them, but opted for joint custody instead. Bowers told investigators he did not like nor trust Michael, and that his eldest son Cameron had once told him that Michael abused both the children and Casey. Bowers goes on to say that he was well aware that Casey and Michael had a history of long and violent arguments. Yet none of this information seemed to discourage him from leaving his children in Michael's care. With all of this supposed knowledge of the abuse in the Jones household, why didn't Richard Bowers do something to ensure the safety of his own children? Perhaps because he wasn't putting much effort into being in their lives in general. Casey had the children most of the time, and Bowers did not consistently make time for the boys. A text message argument between Bowers and Casey accuses Bowers of going an entire year without seeing his children.
So I reached out to her originally June 5th at 5:50 p.m.
Okay. And what does that conversation entail?
I told her, this is Richard. I'm reaching out to you regarding the boys. I'd like to know when they're off from school, and when do they resume back again, and what a good time would be to plan for picking them up for the summer. Thanks. And she goes, they have been out and will be back in August, and we will be out of town most of July. And she says they have been out and will be back in August for twice, the same thing. And so then I answered, good. Well, I'll need them for about 2 weeks, so please be sure to accommodate your scheduling so we can set a proper time for pickup. She says, that's good. After a year, you finally want to see them. You can get them anytime you want, before or after July. I have had plans that are paid for already that I can't change. And she says it's about July 3rd to the 23rd, and that was all on June 5th. And so then I responded back, this isn't any new information. You knew this time was coming, which is why you and I sought an attorney. Anyway, next time be mindful of the scheduling so you can plan accordingly. And she goes, I will not work around when it's finally convenient for you to have something to do with the boys. You have not contacted them in over a year, so I've already made plans for the summer. So as far as this time was coming, no, I had no idea, because you haven't even called them for their birthday or Christmas. So the lawyer was your idea. I have never kept them from you, and the lawyer also said that you give me a 30-day notice, and if I don't have plans, then you get them. You should have had plans months ago, as I did, so I plan around my work and around my college times off, which is in July. I won't be changing stuff. It's already paid off, which my lawyer already knows about. For someone that walked out without even telling the boys anything, you really tell me to be mindful. That's not fair. I'm sorry. The boys are important to you, but they are my life. Everything I do is for them. It has been your loss on what you have missed out on this past year, but I will not change anything in our life to fit your schedule. You are the one that abandoned them. You can have them anytime it's convenient for you, as long as I don't have plans with them. I can't stop their life because you want to come in and out whenever it fits you.
No one ever noticed any aggressive or abusive behavior from Michael. Michael's ex-wife, Sarah, never claimed Michael to be abusive towards her or their children. The only person to claim that Michael was abusive was Casey's ex-husband. Casey's family believed they were a happily married couple. Even though they did not particularly like Michael, he appeared to be a doting father and husband. And Casey's social media pages were always filled with happy family photos and videos. No one thought to look for signs of trouble. None were found until it was too late. No doubt, unaddressed domestic violence played a significant role in the tragic events that occurred in this case. Casey's family continued to struggle with the loss of their loved ones. It has been more than 2 years since they lost Casey and her 4 children, and they continue to wait and see how this horrific tragedy will transpire. In court, Casey's sisters, Sarah and Brandy, talked about how close Casey was with her family and how badly losing her and the children has affected them all. Both of Casey's parents died without seeing their daughter's murderer brought to justice. Sarah said their mother wanted to see Michael get the death penalty. Sarah, however, disagrees with the death penalty. She sees death as an easy out for Michael and wishes him to spend the rest of his life in a cell with nothing but time to think about what he had done. What will the jury decide? Will Michael have to pay for his crimes with his life, or will they choose to have him spend the rest of his life behind bars? If you or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence, no matter the severity, contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline. They are available 24/7 by phone or chat to discuss domestic violence situations and help create a personalized safety plan. Call 1-800-799-SAFE 7233 or visit thehotline.org or a similar organization in your country. Help is waiting.
Say hi to the camera. Say hi. Hi, baby.
He likes the sound of the water.
If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like the video, comment down below your take on it, and subscribe to the channel. Also, hit the notification bell in order to stay up to date each time we reveal a new shocking case. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes peeled. You never know What's lurking in the shadows?